Good evening, everybody. It's now 6 o'clock, so we'll start off. We have all members present, we have lots of officers in the wings, and we have lots of visiting councillors as well, all with official titles, which is great. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee on the 28th of July 2026. I'm Councillor Mark Corey. I'm a councillor from Wivenhoe Ward, and I'm chair of this committee. And I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. Just to go through the housekeeping, in any emergency, we do not have any practice alarms, so if an alarm does sound, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runward Street. This meeting is being held in the grand jury room of the town hall in Colchester and is also being broadcast live over the internet, where it can be watched via the council's YouTube channel, either live or afterwards. Please would all speakers use microphones at all times, speak directly into the microphone as loudly and as clearly as possible. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly and set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. We will have a short break at 7:30 after 90 minutes of business to ensure comfortability. I know, Julie, you may need to stand up and move with your exercise and recovery from a recent injury. So I would like to welcome other members and do introductions. We'll go around the table to my left and then with Lucy and Owen as well as officers. Thank you. Sarah.
Councillor Sarah Naylor, Lexton and Brazick Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Councillor Kevin Bentley, Member for Markstown Lair Ward.
Councillor Natalie Summers, Member for St Anne St John's Ward.
Councillor Julie Young, Member for Greensted Ward.
Councillor Mike Saunders, Member for Stanway Ward.
Councillor Martin Parsons, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Sam McLean, Newtown and Christchurch.
Lucy Bredman, Strategic Director.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you all, and if we need to, we have Paul Dundas, Leader of the Council, we have David King, Deputy Leader of the Council, and we have Alison Jay, Portfolio Holder, relevant to transformation, governance, audit, and everything within her brief that comes under the agenda. A lot of items this evening. So if we need to call any three of you forward alongside officers, then we will. Thank you. Substitutions, Councillor McLean, you're substituting for Councillor Pearson.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, I believe there are no urgent items that have come forward this evening. Owen, thank you. No. Moving on then to declarations of interest. Members, please think through the agenda and let us know or advise us of any declarations of interest, and if any come up and you think need to be flagged during the meeting, please then do so. There are none. Okay, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. For those of us that were here, can I ask if you believe those minutes and those for the Part B agenda are correct? Are there any issues?
Correct.
No, correct. Okay, excellent, thank you. Thank you to Matthew in particular for those. Thank you, Owen. And have your say. We also have no have your say speakers on tonight's agenda. We aren't the most popular committee. Maybe we'll have to encourage more in the future. So moving straight to item 7I, which is the review of data protection policies. And Hayley is coming forward to speak to this report. I know it's not your main agenda item, Hayley, but you're helping cover this evening. It has been a bit of a hot topic in how it influences some of our IT, but I'm sure we'll have some questions over that. But overall, we're looking at some of the reports that actually came through full council the other night as well, which we've been asked to update. So I'll welcome your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, my apologies for being here and not Laura tonight. Laura couldn't make it, so as I was here anyway, I said I would cover the report for her. And she's given me a comprehensive overview for you, so I'm just going to give you some highlights of that. So the one thing I did just want to point out is in the covering report, I think Laura has mentioned there's 4 new policies. There's actually 5 new policies when you read through them. So I think the one that hasn't been mentioned on the covering report, I say it's not 5 new, it's 4 new and 1 existing that's been updated, which is the records management and retention policy. So she's talked about that one in 2.1. So just to clarify, there's 5 policies altogether. So the report presents a suite of updated and newly developed policies for review by yourselves. The policies form part of the Council's wider data protection, information governance and cyber security assurance framework and support delivery of actions arising from the recent data protection audit remediation work. The policy suite strengthens the Council's ability to demonstrate accountability, legal compliance, operational consistency and effective risk management across information handling, records management, surveillance, data breaches, complaints and information rights. And those of you that have been on the committee previously will remember sometimes these policies have come later on in the year as part of the monitoring officer's update. So these are the new ones that need to be considered before that update in November. So there's a total of 5 policies. 3 of them are as a result of audit recommendations. So that's the new CCTV policy, the new data breach reoccurrence repeat offenders policy, and the new EIR policy, which is the environmental information regulations. And then there is a legislative policy, which is a new legislation around the new data protection complaints policy. As I say, you've got the existing records management and retention policy update. Taken together, the policies provide a stronger and more consistent governance framework. They clarify roles and responsibilities, support staff awareness, strengthen reporting and escalation routes, and improve the Council's ability to evidence compliance with statutory, regulatory and audit expectations. So the policies also provide clearer links between operational practice and corporate oversight, including reporting through relevant governance forums, such as the Cyber Security and Information Governance Board, senior leadership arrangements, and the Governance and Audit Committee where appropriate. So it's recommended that the committee is asked to note the updated policy framework, recognise the progress made in response to audit recommendations, and support adoption of the policies as part of the Council's ongoing commitment to robust information governance, cyber resilience, data protection compliance, and accountable public service delivery. And obviously I'm happy to take any questions. I'll answer what I can. If not, I will take them back to Laura for you.
Thank you, Hayley. The report's fairly straightforward, so hopefully questions will be clear from that. I've got 2 questions already from councillors. I just wanted to explain something really straightforward. On page 26, you have a table that says about issues that have been flagged, and it says NA for 4 of them. That's because they're brand new policies and therefore have not had any issues. Good, just wanted to check. I'll save my other questions till after the other members, so I'll go to Councillor Julie Young and then Councillor Martin Parsons after that. Julie.
It's just really the title of Data Protection Repeat Offenders Policy. It seems a really draconian and you know, frankly disappointing title to a document. And I wonder if that's consistent with other authorities in terms of that policy, whether it could be worded in a slightly more positive way. I mean, you say in the report that you know that there's low levels of this, even where individuals instance are low level. You know, it just kind of looks very draconian, I think, with that title.
I don't know how that compares to other authorities. I haven't looked, but I'll definitely take that back to the team and have a conversation about the use of that word, because yeah, it does feel a bit harsh.
Thank you, Julie. Just on that, I don't know what we call them when they happen, but events perhaps, or a repeat event, because I don't think we say you're an offender if you've had one issue. So repeated events or issues perhaps, but I get what Julie's saying, but also if you are a repeat offender and you continue to be someone where breaches are occurring or where you know, it's a danger to the system. So, and I understand why it's got that sort of harsh term, but I also get Julie's empathy and wonder if you know, repeat events rather than repeat offenders. Thank you, Martin, please.
Thank you. Chair, I've got questions on 3 different policies. Do you want to go through them policy by policy rather than jumping around?
I'm very happy for you to take all 3, but it depends whether you want to ask one and then ask for a response and come back or not.
Yeah,
It's up to you.
Response. So, stepping back from the detail, because the risk of governance and audit is we get bogged down in the detail and we miss the big picture. Looking at the picture over there of Philip Morant, 1748 he published the History and Antiquities of Colchester, and he talked about this particular council having a great big box of its records, chaotically organised and quite a lot missing. Now, I'm sure that we think that we're doing an awful lot better now, but one would hope that the retention policy is there to ensure that we actually are and that we've got robust procedures in place. Now, when it says on page 30, ensure council records are reliable, findable, usable and protected throughout their life cycle, and that phrase life cycle is given a little bit more sort of flesh on the bones on page 32, tells us what's done on page 32 throughout the life cycle, but it doesn't say anything at all about what should be the life cycle of particular documents. Now, obviously, you know, there are some documents that, you know, they can be shredded after a year. There might be tax stuff you need to keep for 7 years. There may be planning stuff that needs to be kept for much longer. I have a real concern that without actually saying specifically how long particular type of documents need to be retained for, this policy on its own, there's good stuff in it, but without that, it's not fit for purpose.
I can give you some reassurance. Obviously, we have thousands and thousands of pieces of information that pass through the organisation on an annual basis, and we couldn't possibly put all the lifetimes into one document. So what we actually have is a system that is managed by the data protection team, and I know because I'm a data owner within the organisation in my service area. So every year I have to meet with the data team, and there is actually a formal process that we go through. So there is a record held for every type of information. So, for example, committee minutes, insurance claims, correspondence. We will have a conversation about what should the life cycle of that documentation be. Now, under data protection, there isn't prescribed times. It's for as long as it's reasonably needed by the organisation. So each data owner works with data protection to work out the life cycle of a piece of information. So for example, insurance, I will always have a minimum life cycle of probably 5 years, because a claim can be brought within 3 years of an incident occurring. I need to keep that information. However, it depends on the age of the claimant, because a child who's injured can actually have 3 years after their 18th birthday. So if they're injured at the age of 1, I need to keep that information till their 21st birthday. So that's all recorded in the system. So we actually have a separate system for every type of information that we own. Every data owner goes through that process and sets those parameters. And obviously, if you need to know more details about particular information, we can provide that for you.
Martin, I'll just ask you to pause for a second. Councillor Jay, did you want to add in? That was a good answer from Hayley. Was there anything more you wanted to add? Sorry, Alison, do you want to come forward and say what you want to say, just so we know you either don't need to add or do, but just helps. Thank you.
Yeah, just to say, I was only going to speak in the terms that Hayley has, but there is a retention schedule, so there is a documented process of how long each type of document is held for.
Excellent, thank you. Good that you're both on top of it, portfolio holder and lead officer. Thank you. Martin, back to you.
So if there is a retention schedule of how long each type of document should be held for, surely that needs to be in here, rather than us just being expected to say, well, it's at the officer's professional discretion, because as councillors it's our job to dive down and make sure this is happening, and these are the parameters, so surely that needs to be in here if you wanted to approve it tonight.
I think in some respects you have to be able to rely on the professionalism of the officers that are guiding you. With that documentation and the retention documents, we're probably talking 500 to 600 different types of data. It can't go into this policy. This policy is the strategy, it's the high level, the detail sits behind it. It's like a lot of the information, the risk management policy you'll see later, it doesn't have the detail in there. It sets out how we manage it. We can provide you with that information. If you want to see it, we can provide it. It's not something that I think would be beneficial in terms of this policy, actually having an appendix that will be quite long in terms of each different type of information. There is an element of understanding the expertise of the officers that provide that information for you.
I understand that we don't want 600 different categories in here, but I would have thought we could have had 6 or 10 broad categories with at least a qualitative description there, because that's our role as councillors.
Which 6 or 10 would you choose? And that's the difficulty. We hold information across a vast range of services, so it's really difficult for me to say to you, these are the top 10 pieces of information that we hold. So for example, the insurance claims, we will deal with probably maybe 100 to 150 insurance claims a year, so we have some data there. But by the same token, you have vast amounts of information that will go through waste services, through leisure services. I think it's really hard to say that we can bring you the top 10 pieces of information. More than happy to go back to the service and ask them to provide you with a summary of the different levels of data retention that we have, and they will range from 1 year through to, as I say, it could be up to 3 years after their 21st birthday. Sometimes it's a lifetime. So for example, insurance policies for employers' liability we have to keep for 40 years. So there's so many different variables, it's really hard for me to say, yes, we can bring you a schedule with all of that data in.
So thank you. I think we've recorded and noted your question, which will last for a long time in our records. I think, Hayley, that compromise is a good one. That perhaps in this report we could refer to the fact there is a range of life cycles, and perhaps either give an example or a summary of, or some examples from different departments. So I think it does need a reference to give us that assurance and to show that we are checking up on that kind of thing. And have that understanding. So I think, Councillor Parsons, if that's okay, we could leave that one there. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Repeat offenders. So section 2 of that, which is on page 38, it says this policy applies to all Colchester City employees and councillors. It then goes on to say councillors are subject to this policy but are not employees of the council. Where a councillor is identified as a repeat data breach offender, concerns will be managed through the appropriate member governance arrangement, including referral to the monitoring officer when necessary, in line with the member of code of conduct. When we go on to page 39, examples of repeated non-compliance may include, but not limited to, ongoing use of unapproved systems, devices or storage locations. Now, there's been widespread concern, but I use a council laptop, and this is particularly those who don't, about access to how effectively councillors can do their council role, given the restrictions that are put on using non-council equipment. this looks like it's kind of quietly moving the goalposts. Instead of councillors being the data controllers, suddenly the council is becoming the data controller. And it seems to imply that you've got to have a specific permission to use a particular non-Colchester City Council device, otherwise it's a code of conduct issue. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm fully aware of the issues at the moment surrounding access to data, use of devices, and the issues that members have in that respect. And I know that there is a lot of work going on in terms of bringing your concerns to the team and the team working through those concerns. I think in terms of the breaches, it's not designed to catch members out in terms of where we are at the moment with the use of those devices and the issues that you're having. It's primarily where we have got consistent breaches of data protection of council data. So there is a huge debate in terms of the view of who are data controllers, and I know some of the members consider themselves not to be data controllers, some members consider themselves to be data controllers. We're talking about the information that is on council systems and how you access those, and whether you're breaching the GDPR regulations in terms of personal data, and that can just be as simple as sharing the wrong details, name and address details, sending it to the wrong person. What I would say is it is never straight through to a formal issue. We will always work with councillors to look at the reasons of why it's happening and give you support to do it. But ultimately, if someone persistently breaches those regulations or persistently uses data incorrectly, we do need a mechanism where we can actually report that through and to a more formal process. I'm not saying that any members deliberately do anything, but if we are in a situation in the future where a member feels that the rules don't apply in terms of the data and how they manage it, we do need to be able to have a process to manage that going forwards. What I'm saying is that we wouldn't be straight to that. That would be a long way down the line, but we do need to have that mechanism in there.
Thank you. I'll just come in, Councillor Parsons, and say I think a few of us probably want to come back on this item. Martin, I'll let you come back, and then I think Kevin and then myself will chip in. Thank you.
So just very briefly in response to that, and if I could perhaps later in the meeting come back to another policy. I hear what you're saying. The difficulty I have with it is it's a bit like when you listen to a parliamentary debate and the minister says there is no intention that this would be used in a particular way, but that's almost irrelevant because it's what the detail of the actual law says. And what we've got here is a policy that says one thing, you're saying, but it wouldn't be used in that way. But actually, the fact that we adopt a policy that says that means it could be used in that way. And that's why I think there's a bit of a problem with this.
Hayley, can I just come in and on my point build on that? I think we do have to have a policy, sadly, just in case people do use it in the negative way that we know data can be. I think most of us who at the moment do interchange emails at times, and I almost did it earlier to save Kevin logging on, it's without any malice, and it's actually to use data in the best way. But I think if we are found to have done something that is really wrong or actually does sort of put at risk any data the council has or anything member of the public, I think it's absolutely right that you take us through a process of learning and education. If we do it again, then clearly there's a problem that we have with the system, which is what we're kind of continuing to discuss at the moment. And I know that Alison, as portfolio holder, will continue to sort of bat for both sides in a sense. Welcome forward, Alison, to sort of try and ensure that both sides are represented. I'll just ask Kevin to come in, and then Hayley, I'll let you have a response, and then I'll go to Alison, if that's okay. And then after that, Julie.
Chair, thank you. And thank you very much. Look, all of these are excellent, and we need to make sure we're safe and secure. I don't want to focus in on this council thing, as you can imagine. And I think at best this is now very confused, and certainly for members, we need to be clear. So I remember when the GDPR rules came in, and I remember being told, not just in this authority but elsewhere, that members are their own data controllers. By the very nature that in many cases we publicise other email addresses for residents to contact us. Certainly I do, and I don't really go through the council system to do that. Some residents do that automatically because they look me up or whatever, that'll be true of other members too, but predominantly it is through my personal email, or a personal email I have. Now, what I tend to do is remove all addresses, both officers replying and residents writing, because I think that probably gets me around it. Probably, but I don't know. So we need to be very clear about how we're doing this. And of course, councillors, everyone else in that list, in some way or another, is contracted to the council. Councillors are not contracted to the council. We do sign a code of conduct. I'm not sure if the code of conduct talks much about this, and if it doesn't, then we need to look at that code of conduct to make sure it does. What I'm basically saying, if it is changing, we need to be very clear about what is a breach and what isn't a breach. Our sole reason, apart from the governance of this council, is to represent and advocate on behalf of constituents. So we must have the freedoms to do that within the constraints that we will protect their information. And we used to have, at the bottom of both personal and council emails, a statement of how we would use their information. I think we need to get back to that. So there is a training session to be done here, I think. So this isn't criticism, this is trying to be helpful for everyone. But I think at the moment, members are very confused. I'm a little bit confused because I thought one thing, then even tonight, maybe that's changed. If it is changing, we need to be clear and what the law says about this. And I don't think it's just a Colchester thing. I think this is happening across the country, to be honest with you. And we need to be very clear about how we're going to take this forward. Because if we lose the ability to properly advocate, to provide about swapping information between systems, then that defeats the object of our existing, or the large part of our existing. And just the final point on this, I think when we want to download information about whether we are authorised to have equipment, I don't recall anyone actually offering me a council laptop, if I'm being honest. I could have missed it, but I don't think they have. So I use this. You see this in front of you, and I log into the system. I then, of course, can't download information onto this system. So I just need to be clear what we're going to do about that, and is there a way that we can protect my computer on behalf of the council? I kind of take the view that I'm saving the taxpayer money, because I'm not having a computer system, but I might not be. So I think overall, we need a bit of a rethink, and I think probably this needs to be reflected in this part of the report. The rest of it's perfect, but just this part of the report.
Thank you, Hayley. I promised I'd come back to you, and then to Alison, and then to Judy. So Alison's listening as well as portfolio holder, of course. Hayley.
I think in terms of laptop usage, we're straying into territory outside of this particular policy. And I know that that's an issue that is being looked at and discussed quite widely in terms of the members group for IT and the team themselves looking at those rules and policies. So I'm not going to comment on whether your personal equipment is appropriate or not. I think in terms of the policy, what I'm hearing is you want more clarity, and I take that back to the team and I'll have a conversation with them about listening back to the recording for tonight, listening back to the minutes and seeing where they can provide a bit more clarity in the policy that will give you that reassurance.
Thank you, Hayley. Alison.
So this policy was brought to me very early as I picked up the portfolio. I did express some concerns about it. I think the best way of looking at it is it's actually a framework. And what we're doing in the IT working group, we've got some new councillors on board, some with IT experience, IT infrastructure experience. We're trying to draw together a way that we can work going forward. I think the head of digital is very aware that we work very differently from employees, so it needs a different approach. We're actually working on something at the moment that is a solution to some of the problems with us using council devices. What this is doing is what other councils are doing, which is just putting in a basis. We're looking at bring your own devices, policies, that's not something we have, but we do need to have that structure there for in audit purposes as well, and our compliance. At the moment, we're not compliant as a council. We're working towards it. We're a lot further forward than we were a year ago in that respect. I think we're about 2/3 of the way there. And it is important that councillors are trained, they do the data protection training, they use the right equipment. I just think we just have to take this as it is, that this is just a framework that we can then review and work further on. Clarity, I'm happy with to go back and say, but at some point we need to have a data breach policy. We're required to have one.
Thank you, that's clear. So we've got the sort of the hard policy there, but we're working on how to find solutions to make it more easy to, as Kevin explains, do our advocacy role. I want to come back to you, Martin, but Julie, on this point, please.
Yeah, I think for me it seems a little bit that we're jumping the gun really with accepting this policy that kind of sets out a framework of how you can pull people up if they're breaching the rules. But at the same time we're being told, well, it's all going to be looked into and don't worry about it, they're there, it won't come to that. So I just feel that the timing is off in terms of we're being asked to sign this off tonight when there's other work that's being done to clarify. Because as Kevin has said, actually I feel the same, I thought we were all responsible for data, and I guess, I've had 2 examples recently where, I email Amy Lester about tendering Colchester borders, I email another Amy about CBH casework, and it is so easy to just go, oh, Amy, and Amy Lester, has come back to me and said, oh, this is the wrong Amy, I'm going to delete it, and then, as far as I'll probably be hauled up before the Standards Board now for doing that twice over, but, I'll admit it now, take me away, but, I do think that we've got to have the framework alongside a clarity about where our responsibilities lie, because, Hayley, you sort of said, well, I can't really give you that assurance tonight, whether it's okay to use your own laptop. I thought we were responsible for the data ourselves, and we were recorded with the Information Commissioner and had to take responsibility for that, and that's my understanding.
Thank you, Julie. Your name is on the list. But what I would say is I think it's important to I'm recording that data, and that's going to put me in a breach now as well. What I think for me, what I think here is that we're being asked to bring in this policy, which is important and begins a baseline of getting more compliant. I feel that this policy is about people mishandling with intent to mishandle, and I don't think any of us will fall into that category. No, I understand that, Judy. It does say that it go through the code of conduct, and I think we're still adapting how that code of conduct works in this tighter, more restricted world. So for me, I can accept the policy because that's the hard line of anyone really with malintent. But I feel that we are clear that the code of conduct needs to continue to adapt, and how we apply it needs to be is being looked at, and we still haven't landed on yet where exactly we are. And the leader of the council is here. I'm sure he'll take responsibility for everything. I think that's what you do. I remember having that sort of thing over my head when I was leader. So, Paul, you're just going to say you'll take the flak for everything. Is that clear?
Of course, no change there. Yeah, I am hearing what the committee is saying. I think this framework basically, it's a little bit like it says what happens in the event of a data breach or a councillor doing something wrong, but it doesn't then really define what misuse of storing data in the wrong place is, or give any training or examples. It's rather like saying, well, the policy says that you get 3 points for going over the speed limit, but then doesn't say what the speed limit is. And I certainly couldn't tell you precisely, give you examples of what storing a document in the wrong place is, because we have, as councillors, received no training or information on what we should always be doing and what we shouldn't. I think we've got a vague idea if we do something really wrong. If we send a confidential document to a journalist or post it on Facebook, that's clearly a data breach. But, if we send something outside of the council system, if we send something which is a confidential document to a tendering.gov.uk email address, that is going outside of the council system. Is that a data breach? In what circumstances is it? I couldn't tell you. So I think for councillors, I think you know, this is fine for saying the procedure when somebody's done something wrong is, but it is not training or defining really what those things are. And so I think it needs a lot more work in that area.
Thank you. Really, this evening, Council, it's whether we can accept that as a basis and go forward. And Hayley, I'll just come back to you in terms of compliance. We've talked about having these policies in place in terms of compliance. Is it something that we can, within our documentation tonight, either pull out or hold, or say we are passing it, however, with a caveat that we require a bit further training for members? That's a question I can either leave with you now and come to Kevin and ask you to come back in a moment. Kevin?
Mine's very quickly as a comment, Chair. I just wondered, happy to accept this subject to, I think is what we do. I'm not quite clear, do we accept it and that's it, or does this have to go to full council? That would be one question, because I thought policy was set by the council, but if we're able to, that's okay, but subject to. And just on the code of conduct, I can't remember, because I haven't looked at it for a long time, whether it's specific on data protection, and if it's not, then I think it needs to be, because it'd be hard to refer them to the code of conduct if it's silent on the issue. So we just need to make sure that's in line with the policy as well. So.
Thank you. I'm aware at full council last week we approved the update which said these are the advised policies. So we all agreed those advised policies should be something we take forward as an action, and then they've come a week later. But Hayley, back to you in terms of what I've suggested and what Kevin suggested there, and then the small point from Kevin about data protection as well.
Absolutely, and I will try and remember which points you need me to cover. So if I miss anything, remind me. So in terms of the approval tonight, these are audit recommendations. This one is not one of the legislative ones. So it's an audit recommendation that we have the policy. If you feel strongly that it's not appropriate, then obviously you have that right not to approve it. I would recommend that you approve it subject to. So we have something, because at the moment we have no protection. So at the moment we don't have a policy, which means we have no protection if something happens. And actually, if an incident did occur and the inquest comes afterwards and they ask for what policies did you have in place, what had you provided, and we had nothing, that's a worse position than having something that you don't feel quite fits what you need at this point in time. It's subject to some refinement. And what I would like to just say is on page 39, there are some examples of the repeated non-compliance. So it does give you some indication of where those breaches, how those breaches might occur. So I think from that compliance point of view, my recommendation would be approve it subject to the caveats that you want to put in, and I will take that back to the team. In terms of the actual governance process for it, what I'm not sure off the top of my head is whether it actually forms part of the policy framework. So I need to check the Constitution in terms of the policy framework. If it is part of the policy framework, then it needs full council approval. If it's not, then it can be approved by this committee and can be noted by full council.
Thank you, Hayley. I'm glad you enjoy this policy work. I have Sarah. What you've just said is kind of my guide. I think we do go with it. We need a policy that's clear, and again, for malintent, which I don't expect any of us to do, but that's the baseline. And then we'll work on the code of conduct for members, we'll work on training. But actually, it also puts in place the policy for the wider, 51 of us, and then there's 1,000 or so staff and affiliate staff here that come under that policy, that perhaps it's more important to get that in line and for us to sort ourselves out, subject to, as we've talked about before. Sarah, you were the last person on this.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to just say, I think, alternatively, as members are clearly uncomfortable with what's before them, I appreciate that your very good point that, should something happen, we ought to have a policy. But I think it's a balanced decision. So we haven't had a policy up till now, and I appreciate it's an audit recommendation, but I wonder if members might be more comfortable if those changes were brought and then it was brought back to the next committee, which after all will be a matter of weeks. That's the alternative.
Henny, what's your response to that?
As always, it's members' choice. I can't dictate to you what you should do. The policy's in front of you. You've been asked to approve it. It's your choice whether you wish to or not, and how strongly you feel about that policy.
Thank you. So I will just come back to the point I referred to just a minute ago, that actually I would prefer this policy to be in place for the rest of the organisation whilst we sort out what it is for members, because I think that's more important. I think we're a small minority here. I think the portfolio holder, the leader, and you, Hayley, have heard, and Laura and others can listen back to the concerns we have. And I think you've made it clear that we will continue to be dealt with under the Code of Conduct. You'll deal with members in a way of education at this point, but we need to put everything in place then to ensure it works properly. So that's my steer. I'm not going to say to members whether you want to sort of take a different path, but I think if we can get a consensus here this evening, that's better. So I'm going to put that we do take all policies together, including the data breach policy and repeat offending this evening. If anyone else wants to take the alternative and put that forward to take out reference to councillors at this point, that is possible. I'm still aware, Martin, you had another question on another policy, so I'll let that sit with members. Yes, sorry, Kevin.
To be helpful, I hope, because I'm content to accept it subject to. I just wondered, rather than waiting for the next set of minutes to come out, whether we could ask whether he could send a separate note round to all of us about the subject to, so we know what we're agreeing to. Otherwise, we wait for the next set of minutes and we might just be on to something else and forget exactly what we discussed. To help also guide Hayley. Hayley might have some more information by then to make us feel more comfortable. I'm very mindful not to have something in place is equally as dangerous as getting it wrong. So I'm happy to accept it. I'm trying hard not to say framework because we mean policy, don't we? So I'm happy to accept it as long as we're clear that we have some reservations that need addressing and need to be done urgently and speed. If that's helpful.
Thank you, Kevin. That's helpful. Owen, do you think you've managed to collate some of our concerns in the notes that could then be taken particularly to put to us before the next meeting so we understand and remember what we've said?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think I've got the gist of what concerns have been raised, so I can pull something together. If any members want to give me specific wording for that, they can. Otherwise, I'll make my best efforts and then circulate.
Excellent. And then send it to Kevin's personal email. No, I'm joking. Excellent. Thank you. Of course not. Martin, to you for possibly the last question on this report.
This will be much quicker and easier. CCTV policy. So, page 46, we've got Amphora Cattle. It is responsible for providing footage to the council or police only when authorised. Going on a couple of pages to page 49, obviously providing could mean giving access to watch, or it could mean giving actually the actual video over. Page 49 is a bit more specific, 8A4, where CCTV systems are operated by or accessible to third parties, including cattle or sites not managed by cattle. Access must not be granted until formal approval has been provided by the council's data protection function. Now, part of me starts to think, well, why have we got CCTV in the first place? Because let's say a small child goes missing on the high street. Mum panics, dad panics. They're looking around. It may be the child's just wandered off. I've been in that situation as a parent. Children do that, or it may be something that's far, far worse. But what needs to happen is, as soon as the police are alerted, they need to be able to see that CCTV, not waiting until the appropriate Colchester Council officer has authorised it. So can I suggest that we add the little caveat, except in an emergency?
I think that's probably already the policy, but just to explain it might help, yeah.
Yep, so that arrangement's already in place. We have a different arrangement with the police. Their access to the footage is different to any other organisation because of the very nature of what you've just described. The police station can actually log into our CCTV system at any point in time. So if there is an incident happening, they can see that incident because it is part of that public protection process. So that sits separately to this arrangement. We're talking here about other people accessing the system. So quite often we'll get a request from a member of the public because they've fallen over on a pothole or there's been an accident or there's been an incident and they're requesting access to the data. In the event of an emergency, it's a very different scenario. That access is already there. Those arrangements are very strict. They're in place. And quite often for something like a major civic event, so for example, when we have Remembrance Sunday, we will actually have police in the control room monitoring the CCTV system at the same time. So please be assured that that arrangement is already there.
I think what's caused confusion is page 47. It says Cattle is responsible for providing footage to the council or police only when formally authorised. Perhaps that could...
I'll take that back to the team. So that would be in terms of if there's an incident, they're asking after the event for footage for part of a case or something that they're looking at. So it wouldn't be at the time of a live incident.
Thank you, and I remember in my experience that actually businesses are really happy with the fact that Colchester has really good CCTV, which is shared with the police and with our zone wardens. So there's a sort of security network that do have permissions to use that live data, and we actually do track down either criminals and repeat offenders or in a safety situation, a lost child or anything like that. So I think you will hear from the bid and you'll hear from others that actually our community safety is very good thanks to the investments we continue to make in CCTV. And even I was stopped by the police one time, having enjoyed a rugby game and come here to then celebrate afterwards. And I stumbled back to my car in the town hall because I was injured during the rugby game. I was not drunk, but I was actually caught by the CCTV, swaying back to the car, and the police stopped me at the end of the road, thinking I might have been inebriated. But I blew a 0 on the test and was absolutely fine. And I did happen to mention to the officers, oh, as a council, we've only just invested in better CCTV. So that was brilliant. Well done. So I didn't get 250 quid for you being framed though. Thank you. Julie, you're the last person to...
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's worth members being aware that actually Colchester probably has the best CCTV system in Essex, and I've had the pleasure of going up to police headquarters and actually they can look at it on their system and they do look at it. It's not like they need access to it. They're looking at it all the time and they have officers looking at CCTV system, and I think there's 3 other councils that also have CCTV. A lot of cities and towns in Essex do not have CCTV, and they can follow. I mean, you know, it's really interesting to watch actually. They can say, oh, this is this camera, it's in Crouch Street. You can follow this person there and you can see them walking down the road, even see Mark staggering around, getting back to his car. But yeah, I think it is a good system that is monitored by the police as well as us.
Yes, thank you, Julie. I do think we're leading, as you say, in Essex here. The only one other point I had, Hayley, is I think we're all aware that when we see data protection, GDPR, policies and things, and we're asked to read through them and know them off by heart, and I think there's a slight issue for employees sometimes of ensuring they're engaged by these documents and they're engaged by training. So it's a point to take away as well, that to ensure we do look at them, how can you make it more engaging? How can you ensure people are thoroughly interested and up to date on these data breach policies? So that's just a challenge to take away if you can. Thank you, everybody. I think that was really good. Thank you, Hayley. I know you were covering this evening, but you were really on top of the issues and are trying to help us as members. So thank you. I think we're pretty much there. members, can I ask then that with the caveats that we've discussed, are people happy to approve this report with the policies and the updated policy in there? I'm happy if people want to not do that, but I want to lead that we do take this forward and we work on the subject 2 points as discussed, and we'll ask Owen to then circulate this part of the minutes agenda just to keep that on top. And if you can include both the leader and deputy leader and Councillor Alison Jay as those involved in the meeting as well. Can I ask, is that approved?
Chair, I want to abstain because I just think it's premature to adopt those policies as we are.
I'll go to a vote then rather than consensus. So all those in favour, please. That's 4. Abstentions? 2. And against? 2. Okay, so we carry the policy, but thank you for those indications. It's clear that some people still want further work, and that we've caught that, we've understood that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Amy. Right, we move on to finances, and it's the Treasury Management Annual Review, the outturn. So we welcome Anna D'Alessandro. Is Anmol coming online? Yeah. Okay. And we've got David Randerson as well. Okay, thank you. Good evening. So we'll have a look at this report and the requirements of regulation to produce the report, ensure we're in line with the SITFA code. So I will hand over to Anna to put forward this report and give us a brief summary. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Thank you. Anmol is not in the country at the moment, but she's joining us because she leads the Treasury management function, so she's listening into the conversation. Maybe if there's a detailed question, she will be able to answer it. So what my proposal is, there's a lot of information in this report. So what I want to draw out is not matters of transaction, but matters a little bit more strategic, but also some salient points to bring to your attention. And there's some further information that I want to talk to you about, which is not in the report, but relevant, particularly for moving forward with some of these Treasury items. So what you have in front of you is the outturn report. So it closes off 25-26 financial year. It's also based on the 25-26 Treasury Management Strategy, which was, you have to go back to February 25 when it was approved as part of the budget setting suite of documents, not the February just gone. So we have to remind ourselves of that. There are 3 key sections of this report. Firstly, we talk about the borrowing. Then we talk about investments, and thirdly is the more technical area, I suppose you would say, around prudential indicators. In terms of, and all I want to say is, as they're all set out in tables between tables 5 and 9 in Appendix 1, is all of the more transactional information around the borrowing and investments. In terms of a strategy, you would see that we discussed the certainty rate in here, and HM Treasury allows us to borrow money via the PWLB at a discounted rate called the certainty rate. It's even further discounted for the HRA by another 40 basis points. So it's 60 basis points less than the PWLB standard rate if you provide them with a set of certainty plans. And what that means is you provide them with your capital program plans for the year, and also 3 years hence, which we do as part of our budget setting process anyway. So if you provide them with that information on an annual basis, you will be able to access some preferential rates on PWLB, which we do, and we maximise that. That certainty rate is, at the moment, they say will end in March 27, but with all of these things, sometimes it's extended. At the moment, March 27 is when the PWLB HRA preferential rate will end, but the general fund of minus 20 basis points from the standard PWLB rate will continue, is what we know at the moment. Overall, our portfolio is very well diversified. We've got about a third long, a third short and 2/3 long. covering a number of sources, being markets, local authorities and PWLB. We do mainly borrow from PWLB, but also from a general fund perspective, mainly from other local authorities because it's the preferred rate. Investment strategy, our strategy over the last few years, and I assume it was your strategy because interest rates were low, to use investment funds to repay loans. It made sense at a time when interest rates were low to do such a thing, but that's what you have been doing. We invest in money market funds, so it's we work on the local government principle of prioritising security and liquidity over yield, which is what you would expect because we want to minimise our risks around our investments. So we only invest in things that are nothing's risk-free, but less risk as possible. In terms of the third section, which is around the prudential indicators are set under the Prudential Code, which is issued by CIPFA, and it's around the Code of Borrowing. Essentially, these are fiscal rules which CIPFA ensures that we follow to make sure that our borrowing is affordable and sustainable under the code, so we're not borrowing more than we can actually repay back at any point in time. There are four main indicators on the code that are on the Prudential Code that are set out in the report. The first one is around the maturity structure of borrowing. Then it talks about one which you hear a lot of us say, CFR, capital financing requirement. Then there's operational boundary and authorised limits against external borrowing. The maturity structure of borrowing, I've set out quite a lot in the covering reports, and in paragraph 1, you will see that I've identified a breach. I'm legally obliged in my role as Section 151 to let you know if there's a breach to that indicator, and that's at the earliest opportunity, and I have found out whilst we were preparing this report, and that I'm bringing that to you. It isn't a legal indicator, it is just an external warning system, so there is nothing punitive around that breach, so there are no financial measures or illegal measures. When I found out, I've put in place a full review of that maturity structure. What effectively that indicator does is make sure that all of our borrowing doesn't all occur at the same time. So it spreads out the borrowing over the course of the profile of our loans, which go from 0 to about 50 years. So it's over a long period of time, so it just spreads that all out. The Treasury team are currently doing a full review of that, amongst other things, which I'll talk about later. And as soon as we have a review, I will look at it, and we will make sure that we have a conversation with our Treasury advisors, and if we recommend that there needs to be a change to our limits, which I think there should be, then we will bring that back to the committee, and it has to be approved by full council. But let's wait and see until that review is done, and we'll bring back the findings of that. The next indicator, which we talk about a lot, is the capital financing requirement, the CFR, and that's our legal capacity to borrow, and it sets out the maximum potential borrowing that a council should undertake. Obviously, you don't want to go anywhere near the CFR because it is a maximum limit. You want to remain below it. At the moment, one of the pieces of work that Anne Mole, who is on the screen at the moment, with a number of people in the team, one being David, is to look at how we disentangle our CFR from HRA and general funds. It has been something which has been historical in the council, so every time a CFR or a capital financing requirement, i.e. our need to borrow, is discussed and calculated, it's done as a total figure for HRA and general fund. It may sound easy to disentangle those two things, but it's not, because it goes back a long way. But I understand that the need to do that, and it makes sense to do that so we can appropriately identify the cost of borrowing to the HRA and the cost of borrowing to the general fund. The borrowing in the HRA is far exceeds any borrowing in our general fund. We do not do a lot of borrowing in our general fund. So that piece of work is happening at the moment. There's a number of people in the team looking at that. Of course, as soon as that is done, we will bring that information back to a committee and we will start reporting that information separately in our monthly reports. But we need to make sure that it's correct, which is why I asked for some time for us to do that piece of work and do it properly. Then the report goes into a few bits of technicalities, which discusses the relationship between our estimated capital financing requirement as set out in the 25-26 Treasury Management Strategy of 312 million against an actual CFR as identified in Note 17 of our 25-26 accounts of 319 million.7. They're not on a like-for-like basis because IFRS 16, the leasing standard, says that we need to remove some of our IFRS-related leases before we can compare those two numbers, because on the face of it, it looks like that we are borrowing more than what we'd estimated we were going to borrow when the Treasury Management Strategy was adopted. That's not the case. So when we adjust the CFR, we come down to a figure of 286 million, and the adjustment is 33 million for IFRS leasing, as I said, for IFRS outstanding leases, and the biggest element of the 33 million is 32 million of CNG Leisure Park. So you would recognise the CNG Leisure Park of 32 million. There's about 1 million of private sector property leases, but the vast proportion of that 33 million adjustment is because of CNG Leisure Park. And then we compare that to what we actually borrowed. So our borrowing requirement, how much we've actually borrowed as at the end of March 25 was 212 million.9, the cumulative impact. The increase during the year was 22 million. So we actually borrowed 212 million, and the difference between the adjusted CFR and what we actually borrowed is 74 million, and that 74 million is internal borrowing. So we've used our reserves, and we've used our own cash balances, which means that we have effectively borrowed in the external market £74 million less than what we needed to. So that is the way the borrowing works. You always use internal borrowing first, which is what we had factored into our strategy. The other two bits of CFR are where it starts to become, I think, a bit more interesting, and one of them is the operational boundary, and that is the external borrowing early warning system. So what's that saying is, before you hit your authorised limit, which is the illegal one, the operational boundary says you've got X% or X million before you hit your target. So be warned, you are borrowing too much. So that's an important indicator, and for the 26-27 Treasury Management Strategy, which is the current year, remember we're talking about last year, there was, the figure has been reduced from 390 million to 330 million. And you will see more information on that as we move into this year. So in September, when we bring you the Q1 reports, you will start to hear more about 26-27. What we're doing now is closing off 25-26. The authorised borrowing limit, that's the important one. That's illegal to breach. So what we're saying is that we cannot borrow in excess of what we have set out in our authorised borrowing limit. And that says that from an affordability point of view, that is legally how much we can borrow. And again, as part of the current year's strategy, that figure was also reduced to 350 million from 415 million. Those amounts are huge. So I can't imagine we'd ever get anywhere close to borrowing those kinds of money, because you wouldn't want to. And I suspect that's why the decision was taken to reduce those amounts when we set the Treasury Management Strategy this year. As I said, from a general fund perspective, we just do not borrow a lot of money, which is a very good thing. So in terms of this section, I just wanted to finish by saying the problem with all of these indicators are that every person who does these could come up with a different number. It's very much based on professional judgment. There aren't strict rules. It's like the application of accounting standards. It's all judgment based. So it's not black and white. But however, I think SIPFA recognises there's probably needs a bit more kind of rules-based around this, being a bit more specific. So there's a consultation out at the moment on these indicators, which closes on the 12th of August. We will be providing input into this through our Treasury Management Advisors, MUFG, and any changes will take effect from next financial year. MHCLG are also doing a similar thing around metrics on capital financing, looking at affordability, proportionality, sustainability, all of those good things around borrowing. So they're both doing it at the same time. So what we will do at the appropriate juncture is review what is coming out of the consultation and bring back to you what we believe is going to come out before 27-28, and more specifically what that means for Colchester as opposed to something more generic. And on a final point, I've been here now a year and a half, and I think we've been on quite a journey with Treasury Management, and Anmol has been doing a lot of work with me to try and improve our cash flow. Obviously, the number one requirement is to limit the amount of borrowing to the most minimal amount that we have to do. In order to do that, you need to have a very, very strong cash flow forecast. So we have been spending a lot of time in strengthening our forecasting, and the biggest bit of the biggest bit of that goes into the borrowing requirement is the capital program. So our capital program is half borrowing and half grant funded. So that borrowing requirement has to go somewhere, and we don't have enough internal borrowing, so we need to do some external borrowing. So we need to get a much stronger link between those two things to minimise to the extent possible external borrowing. So we're doing a lot of work around that, particularly this year and the next financial year in the lead up to LGR, to make sure we're in the best place possible with our borrowing and limiting it as much as possible. We're looking at the appropriateness of our 20 million liquidity buffer that we've been using for the last few years. I did speak to our Treasury advisors about a year ago when I started, and it seemed to be right at the time. Again, this is all judgmental. So, but we're going to have another look at that. And also what I said before in terms of our breach on the maturity profile, we are currently doing a piece of work looking at the upper and lower limits, and the outcome of that will come back to this committee. And I think will be a really neat thing for you to see the dashboard of our prudential indicators on a quarterly basis, and that's one of the things we are currently working on at the moment. The other thing that I introduced when I started was making sure that we follow a bit of a regime with the committee, whereby we identify the need to borrow, that at that committee that is the closest to us doing that I come to you to say it's likely that we are going to have to borrow some money, and this is all getting out, making sure that our cash flow forecasting is as tight as it can be. So we can come to you for the HRA and general fund and say, it's looking like the end of the year we're going to have to borrow some money. And then I don't know what that's going to look like, because obviously I don't know what's going to happen to interest rates. But then the decision is mine with the Treasury advisors, and then we come back and said, we borrowed this amount of money, this was the best rate we could get on the day, and this is the profile. So we'll give you warning that it's going to happen, and then we come back and tell you what's happened. So that's how I'd like it to work, and we've been trying to do that over the last year and a half. So I've come to the end of what I want to say, but all I want to leave you with that we are doing a lot of improvement work here, and we've moved a long way in the last year and a half, but I recognise that there is still more to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anna. I will kick off and then look to members. So, previously, of course, declaring the interests as a previous portfolio holder, working with you, Anna, and the team, I think we are definitely moving in the right direction, and the understanding of the relationship between the asset programme and the disposal programme, and reduction in borrowing where possible, and reduction in the MRP, the minimum revenue provision, which also eats into our abilities to kind of borrow more and spend more. It's good that we've set out on a trajectory of reducing where possible and balancing that capital programme as much as possible and reducing the amount we have to borrow. So that's been good. Secondly, I wanted to say that dashboard of prudential indicators I think would be welcomed by the committee and look forward to seeing that as well. Thank you. I just wanted to ask two specific questions, and actually Paul as leader might need to step in because after a few months out of the role, I just wanted to ask a few questions around the infrastructure spending around Colchester Northern Gateway. So we had this roughly 7.6 million allocated for possible infrastructure works, highways works up at Colchester Northern Gateway. We continue to work with officers to try and reduce the need to do that and decouple some of the sites up there from the need to do the highways work, which had been excellent work from officers and Patricia's team. I just wondered where we are with that because, and then Anna, it comes back to you as well, we had been looking in the capital programme at that being something to spend on, and in the report 4.3 it talks about not borrowing in advance necessarily when not needed, but I did wonder if we had, I know we don't borrow for specific things, we borrow for the capital programme, but it was in the capital programme. So I just wondered where we were with that. 4.3, page 80, sort of talks about borrowing in advance. So I just wondered how that links in. It's a very specific question about a very specific project, but it was quite a chunk within the capital programme. So I think between you, Paul, and Anna, I'm just happy to hear an update, perhaps politically, and then how that's dealt with financially. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Chair. I think to a certain extent you managed to answer your own question by mentioning decoupling there. You're correct that the original outline planning permission on that site required a significant amount of highways infrastructure work. That was primarily thought to be for the heavily office-based nature of it. Now, I don't want to get into the position of predicting planning, okay? But I understand there is likely to be submitted a detailed planning application very shortly for housing on what we know as R1 and R2 sites. We are hopeful that, and again, let's not predict anything, that the highway requirements have been decoupled from the need to get that housing underway. So it's quite likely, I think, that will come out of the capital programme and won't be necessary. But until that actually happens and we've actually got it in writing, we know that the house building can go ahead without it, then obviously we're being a little bit cautious about what we say. I hope
Thank you,
that
Paul.
sort of answers it.
Yeah, thank you. And Anna, is there anything around the kind of borrowing in advance and those questions?
Yeah, no, I mean, you were right. You said at the beginning we can't attribute the borrowing to a specific project because it just goes into a gap of cash that's required. And obviously, if it comes out of the capital programme, then in theory there's less of a borrowing requirement. So it's a generic question. It's a generic answer, but it's the same concept. The less you've got in your capital programme that's borrowing related, the less the chance it is that you're going to have to borrow against it.
Good, that'd be great if it does come out, and I hope you praise the current portfolio holder and the previous ones as well.
I praise anybody at any opportunity, Chair.
Excellent, and I do want to actually praise Lee Rainsforth, who's the officer who has done most of that decoupling work. Thank you, Lee and Patricia and the team. Thank you, and I just wanted to check, so with our debt, some of it matures, it is over 50 years or so. So I can't even guarantee I'll be around to check that, but that is amazing. Would you know, you probably can't answer this, but what borrowing that is at all? That goes on that long? Is it David's pension, Councillor King? Sorry, nothing. Anna, would we know? Oh, I just saw that some of the maturity on page 82 is 50 years and above, and we have 4.2% at actual. So we do have borrowing that has that length of life on it.
Appendix 2 has got up to 2071. There's a whole range of borrowing here. I can't tell you what that's related to because I can't tell you which assets related to either.
Would it be HRA?
But no,
most likely. Or
this was
could be anything.
because remember we bundle it all up, don't we?
Yeah.
As I said, we need to strip it back. So at the moment it could be
Yes.
either. Yeah.
And things like the capital programme, the HRA, these are things that are going to be around for more than 50 years. So for me, that I'm reassured. I'm fine by that. But it was more of an inquisitive question. Okay, thank you. I'll look to the rest of the panel. I have Kevin and then Martin. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. A very comprehensive report, excellent. I mean, my question is a little bit looking to the future, but very short-term future. So if the timetable for reorganisation is on course, the new shadow authority will be elected in 10 months from now. How much of this information are we sharing between ourselves and the 3 other partners that will form the North East Council? Because at some stage we've got to clarify what the level of debt is going to be for that new authority. And I never fail to remind people we're not merging, we are abolishing 4 councils and creating a new one here, and potentially 4 others. So I just wonder how much we are sharing at this stage to make sure we have an accurate figure to hand over in March 28.
The short answer, Councillor Bentley, is a lot of information. We're doing so much work on LGR. You wouldn't be surprised. Working with all of us are working with the county, and I'm at the moment the North East Essex representative for the Section 151s, working with Nick Evely and Steph and the other council and the other 151s of the other 4. And we have a whole list of things we're working on. As you can imagine, Thurrock talk about this a lot, unsurprisingly, but there's about 13 areas that we're looking at for safe and legal. Myself and my equivalent in Thurrock are leading on the budgeting aspects of how we get from now to 28, 29 budget, safe and legal. And unsurprisingly, one of the 13 elements which comes in the budgeting side, but also separately in terms of all of the information on our balance sheet, is one of the areas of safe and legal. You can imagine the county having to disaggregate all of the balance sheet information, and one of it is borrowing. So it's being done in multiple areas. It's being done from a devolution perspective from the county. So we're going to get a cut of the balance sheet and whatever's sitting on the county's balance sheet, but we're also sharing information amongst ourselves in terms of where we are at with our borrowing at points in time. There's a ton of information, so we're working very well together, and we're all very transparent about the information. It's just doing it in such a way that we're comparing apples and not apples and pears.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Anna. Julie, was it on this point? Oh, okay. I'll go to Martin then to. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, a 50-year loan, we'd be into another cycle of LGR by that stage, possibly. Coming on to the short-term borrowing, you said this temporary 4% breach against maturity limits. You said, correct me if I'm wrong, that you discovered it when you were preparing this report. So that kind of raises the question, why was it not discovered at the time? And what procedures have we put in place to make sure we do discover that, or ideally discover it just before it does happen?
No, agreed. Just because it's an early warning system doesn't mean you have to ignore it. Otherwise, what's the point of having it? And I completely agree with you. It was discovered whilst this report was being put together, which is not ideal. I completely agree, and I brought it to you at the earliest opportunity. It was previously being monitored on an annual basis, which is not good enough. So now what I've put in place is, as I've written in the reports, is that now we are monitoring it on a quarterly basis along with all of our indicators, and that's the kind of information that I'll make sure that you will see as part of your dashboards. I do believe that those limits need to change. I think they're way too restrictive in a very volatile geopolitical environment, which is what happened. So the reason it happened is because when we decided to, when we thought we were going to borrow was at the end of last year. By the time we got around to doing it in March, on the 1st of March, the war hit and everything went crazy. And all I want to say is I would have made the same decision because cash trumps everything. So whether I would have breached it or not, and I know you can say, well, what's the point? But the point is that the limits aren't right, but cash is king. So I would have made the same decision anyway to borrow because we needed the money to plug a gap.
Okay, I hear what you're saying about the war. Can you just clarify, though, when we're talking short-term borrowing, if the government talks short-term borrowing, it's talking like 90 days. How short-term are we talking?
Anywhere between 0 and 12 and 24 months. That's just pretty standard. So usually it's about 12 to 24 months, not that short.
Okay, so
Yeah.
a quarterly review
Yes.
is appropriate.
Yes,
Right,
yes,
okay.
yeah. It won't disappear by the time you see it, basically. Yeah.
Thank you. Julie, please.
I just wanted to clarify what the risk is in terms of decoupling the borrowing as you intend to do between the general fund and the HRA. You stated that the general fund borrowing is low in comparison with the HRA borrowing. If you split the two, does that mean that there would be some detriment to the ability to borrow against the HRA, which might impact in terms of our ability to continue to deliver against the HRA business plan?
Yeah, I understand your concerns, Councillor Young. So we determine the overall borrowing requirement. At the moment, as I said, the overall requirement that we borrow, the 312 million that we estimated last year, we were going to. This is a cumulative figure. You have to remember this is since records began. Basically, CFR, the annual increase was 22 million. The 312 million has been a cumulative figure over the number of years. We set that requirement, so it wouldn't be my only concern in terms of a risk, which will have to be worked through, is how much of the interest cost is being bared by the HRA. It is proportionate. It's not the amount of borrowing, because we would need to make sure it would be affordable, and because as a quantum here, we never even get close to the total which we believe is currently affordable. So I don't believe it's an affordability thing. I believe that the share of costs might change, and that's why we need to do the work and do it properly to make sure that each of the ring-fenced accounts, being the general fund and the HRA, have got the fair costs associated with any borrowing requirement, and that's the bit that we need to work through.
Julie to come back, and then I've got Councillor Paul Dundas as well.
I suppose that raises other questions for me in terms of does that mean that going forward, when that piece of work happens, the affordability on the HRA might be at risk?
Ultimately, in terms of the HRA, any borrowing has to meet prudential limits. So it is more about, can the HRA afford to repay it? It's not a discrete level of the debt. It's can any new borrowing be financed by whatever scheme it's doing? Obviously, borrowing happens in the HRA for various reasons. One being to fund asset repair work through existing stock, but equally to acquire, develop new properties. And as part of any one of those processes, we go through a viability assessment that ensures that any borrowing that we're taking on is repaid over a predetermined period. Normally, we look at around 30 years. So ultimately, the actual physical level of the CFR is not so important as to the cash flow that it's generating. Does that make sense?
Thank you, David, as well. Paul, please.
Yeah, I was just going to come in now. Anna might correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Anna was really implying that we're decoupling the HRA and the general fund, because the whole point is they're not really coupled directly in the first place. They're ring-fenced. That's the whole point of the HRA. I think what we were saying is that to try and improve the reporting in terms of giving a clearer picture of where our CFR is in the ratio and the relationship or the ratio between the general fund and the HRA is a good step in the right direction. And actually, it's quite important. We're talking about LGR. You know, when you're comparing council debts, it's very important that you know which is HRA and which isn't, because if you look at you can look at some councils out there in Essex and they compare them to Colchester's debts, and you say, well, they've got virtually no debt, whereas Colchester's in terrible trouble. Look, it owes hundreds of millions. Well, the reason is we have an HRA. And if you look at any council which runs an HRA, it will have a vastly bigger balance sheet, much higher borrowing than one without. It will conversely also have higher assets because it will own a load of properties. So I think it is actually a really useful exercise to know when you're looking at our CFR and our debt, what comes from the HRA and which is in the general fund in terms of judging the overall picture of the council. So I think decoupling is probably not quite the right term. I think individual reporting or something might be a better term if I...
Yeah, no, and what Paul said is absolutely right, because on the face of it, when we were doing the LGR business case, it looked like Colchester had a huge amount of borrowing for the size of our budget, but that wasn't. It was because the vast majority was for the HRA. Yes, it's for reporting purposes, but also for a fair share of the costs when you're reporting. So that's the work that we're doing in terms of transparency, really, as well.
Thank you. Martin, did I have you down or have you already asked? Excellent, okay. Thank you. Well, I feel that we've scrutinised this pretty well. So with the recommendations that we have, we are to note the annual Treasury Management Report and everything we've heard with that. Are we happy to note the report? Excellent. All right. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Anna, for that. We then move to the Finance Outturn Report. It's now 26 minutes past 7. I'm happy to go to this report, but it may take 10-15 minutes. So would councillors prefer a break now or to carry on? Break now? I've seen a few nods. That will be enough then. Okay, break now. Please return. I'll give us 8 minutes. Please return at 19:35, 7:35. Thank you. Okay, we will resume the meeting after that comfort break. So we move to 7.3, which is the Finance Outturn Report. The committee will consider this report and the details noted in the financial performance sort of report, the general fund revenue and capital and housing revenue accounts and the outturn for those. Anna, I'll come to you first, and then you will use your supporting team, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the outturn report. So this is the year-end report for 25-26. So similar, in a similar vein from last time. This is closing out last financial year. I'm just going to do something very quick on reserves, and then I'm going to hand over to Jack, and then to David. Jack will talk about revenue and capital, and David will talk about general fund housing, temporary accommodation, and HRA. We're going to presume you've read all of this. So the way I always do an outturn report is try and tell a bit of a story of the year. So what are the things that we did, and we've been doing a lot of work, particularly in the last year and a half I've been here, to try and be on an improvement journey on financial management and finances and finance as a team. So there are a lot of things we have put in place, and I take the opportunity to kind of make a marker of those in an outturn report. I only wanted to make a quick comment about reserves. So as Section 151, the reserves are one of the very important things that I have the custodianship of. And one of the things that I need to do as Section 151 is make sure there is sufficiency of particular reserves. We all know the General Fund Reserve is one of the reserves that I guard with my life, and for me to play with and hopefully build up, not reduce, which we've managed to do this year because last year because we had a surplus, and I'll leave that to Jack. But obviously the things that were important when I was thinking about the spend for the following financial year, i.e. the one we're currently in, were the obvious things like LGR. I've mentioned at the last committee meeting that we're currently in the throes of doing an options appraisal because our finance system is close to dying a death. And we needed to set aside some money from that. And also there was an IT pipeline that Darren Kidson had brought forward, that there are some other corporate systems we need to invest in. So there's a bit of investment that needs to be done that cannot wait until LGR, because as you know, systems are a long-term thing, and it will not be a day one thing when we merge as a new unitary. So I took, on the basis that it had to be my best estimate, because we didn't have business cases, so I took the best estimate of what I thought at the time to give us some resilience in both LGR and also in the systems. You'll also see that it's not Turnstone anymore, is it? It's the CNG Leisure Park. That needed to be topped up, and that top-up happened at the end of 25-26, which means the reserve was extinguished. It was extinguished before that. We had to do some small top-up at year-end, largely unachievement of income. So some of the tenancies hadn't paid some of the incomes they needed to pay. So we had to top that up. At the end of 25-26, so I needed to allow for that. The strategy was we have a business rates reserve which had about £2.114 million in it. That has been topped up in the past from business rates pooling money. In the year before, the year I started, at the end of 24-25, we were handsomely rewarded with £3.8 million. Those days are gone. I did use that to create some reserves, and then I put the balance back into the business rates reserve because it can be used to support the bottom line. So everything is very kosher and legal. So I borrowed against that reserve with the approval from our CEO to say I need to start the year with a healthy balance on the LGR reserve and systems reserve. So I borrowed against that, and I will be repaying that back in the autumn when we receive our last lot of business rates pooling money for 25-26, which we should be getting around 1.4 million. So you can see how since fair funding reform, how business rates pooling is no longer a thing, to the point where 25-26 is the last year where it will be beneficial for us. So anyway, I'll take it. while it's coming. So 1.4 million will be used to top up these reserves, to put back in the business rates reserve when it comes through. And as at the end of, I think by the time we get it, we'll have a balance of about 700,000 in the business rates reserve. We have to also remember, because we ended the year in a surplus, that the contingency that I created when I came to Colchester back at the end of in February 25, because we didn't need that. So it's not in the base budget, but because we haven't used it, which was great, we can roll that forward to support the bottom line for 26-27. And with the in discussions with the services, there is some more money required for the local plan reserve, and I've just moved some over from the planning appeals reserve, which was all agreed with the service. So we've moved it over, and it's likely more money will be required to be moved from the planning appeals reserve this financial year into the local plan reserve. We always knew it was never going to be enough, but there is sufficient in there to get things moving for this financial year. We also have a couple of slides in here with some detail on all of the reserve movements, and last year I made the commitment to this committee that I would be providing you an update on reserves on a half-yearly basis. So this is the outturn from last year, so at month 6 you will get another update on reserves and then an outturn again. So that's all I want to say. If I may, Chair, if we can just continue to go down our path and present and then ask questions at the end, if that's okay. And on that basis,
sure.
Hand it.
Thank you, Anna. Good evening, members. Pleasure to meet you. My name's Jack Burton, not Leonard, unfortunately. I started here around April, so there never is a good time to start in finance. So how about the start of year-end collection? So anyway, on to the general fund outturn position. A very small surplus, but a surplus nonetheless, of £158,000. That is a very slight change to the Q3 forecast predicted, £58,000 adverse. The service area overspends that you will see are negated by favourable corporate income and expenditure, and the service areas that were showing pressures were not a big surprise from what was reported in Q3. The themes were recurring. Demand-led pressures, including homelessness and temporary accommodation, which David will come on to later. He's very knowledgeable on that. Corporate services, including benefit payments and interim finance costs, were 1.7 million. The homelessness TA part was 1.4 million. There was underachievement in Leisure World and museum income collectively of 0.7 million, and also building control had an overspend of 0.4 million. There were some good news stories, namely 0.8 million of additional income in parking. So overall, the themes, as I say, there aren't any surprises for. The slides show the individual areas in further detail. So I will also talk about capital, and then I will move on. In terms of capital, general fund, the council has outturned 18.6 million against a budget of 28 million, which was a reset budget in month 9, a variance of 9.3 million, which has been carried forward into 26-27. That does compare favourably to the previous financial year, 24-25, where slippage was 16.1 million. Page 118, which is slide 32, does illustrate how the £9.3 million is comprised, including the project delivery slippage. And so I assume the prior reading of all this, so shall I pass over to David to talk about housing and then questions at the end? Yeah. Okay, so I'll pass you over to David to talk about housing in more detail.
Thank you very much, Jack. If I start with the housing revenue account, as previously mentioned in this forum, it is a ring-fenced account separate from the rest of the council's finances entirely funded from tenant rents that we collect. The outturn for 25-26 was favourable in terms of the budget position. We managed to achieve an additional surplus on the account after taking into account income and expenditure of 1.2 million. Of that 1.2 million, 200 was placed into general reserves, and we earmarked 1 million into an earmarked reserve to help offset future capital expenditure to, in effect, reduce the need to borrow or find external sources of income. In terms of capital expenditure, which is a mix of the asset maintenance work to our existing stock, in which we invested just under 25 million, whilst we invested just under 16 million in purchasing new properties. Again, we managed to achieve a greater amount of property purchases for less than we had budgeted. So again, a very positive outcome in terms of delivering accommodation to residents of the borough. In terms of the general fund homelessness side, I'm sure you've all glanced over the graphs, etc., that I've provided. But cutting to the chase, as Jack has said, we're looking at we had a 1.4 million total overspend on homelessness, of which 1.2 million relates to the provision of accommodation. The council provides accommodation predominantly from the private sector, mixed between bed and breakfast through to longer term nightly lets, but also the recent initiative of working with Beyond the Box in terms of ex-student accommodation. The overall increase that we've seen was from an average of 454 households at the end of 24-25 to an average of 530 households by end of 25-26. And this is what fueled the increase in costs over 24-25, and that was despite the mitigation of using beyond the box, which is substantially cheaper than going out to the general private sector. What we really saw was problems in terms of prevention because of access to private rented sector for applicants was significantly decreased by a number of factors such as the Renters' Rights Act, and in terms of our own stock, whilst we were growing the stock, it could not keep pace with the increase in number of people presenting to the council that were homeless. As highlighted in this report, this impact doesn't end at the end of 25-26. It's continuing through this year, and I want to highlight to the committee that we are proactively looking at mitigations to help reduce the burden in 26 and 27. These will be brought to the committee when we are reporting the end of Q1, but include additional ways to try and increase the internal supply of houses, looking at ways that we can invest more in prevention to see if we can actually sort of slow down the number of people that we need to house, and looking at internal ways that we can help to move people on faster from TA into council housing stock by looking at letting standards and letting processes. So ultimately, yes, the position at the end of 25-26 was a significant overspend. That is continuing, but Colchester City Council and Colchester Borough Homes are working tirelessly to try and find mitigation measures to address this. Thank you.
Thank you all three of you. I think that's given us a pretty good summary of the whole report. and the year that we've had and the learning that we're taking and the actions that are going forward, especially in the HRA, for example, where it's so important to provide homes for people and to reduce that cost of temporary accommodation, which continues to impact our bottom line. I haven't seen any hands fly up just yet, so I'll ask my questions and then see if there are any more. Just some fairly high level points that in the report, point 1.2 and 1.3, we talk about underspends helping the budget, 3.6 million and 1.2 million, reduced corporate sort of in terms of increased income, corporate income. It says underspend, Anna, but is that not, I mean, it's the right terminology, but was it not part of the policy to reduce MRP and to bring in capital receipts as planned? That's pretty much what that is? Okay, so you're nodding. For the recording, you're nodding. Okay.
Just to add what Jack said, so last year we were fortuitous, maybe that's not the right word, but against what we had budgeted on corporate income and expenditures, I call it, which is the congregation of interest payable, interest receivable and MRP. All of those to budget, and yes, MRP was very much helped with our disposal program, which also helped our cash flow, which I should have made that link earlier. But the CIE, the corporate side was a big contributor to the fact that we managed to achieve an underspend, partly because of MRP savings, because of disposal program, which will continue into over the next few years, particularly this one, which we're reviewing at the moment. But also, I suppose you could say that the budgets weren't appropriate. So against budget, we overestimated our interest payable, underestimated our interest receivable. So they both went the same way. They went the right way. But I suppose that was luck and it can't be relied on this year. So I doubt whether we're going to have those big upsides in the corporate side. Apart from MRP, we have taken some of that already, but there might be some more upside in MRP on disposals. So we were fortuitous last year, and we won't probably be as fortuitous on the corporate side this year as we were last year.
Thank you for that. That answers my question. Councillor Dundas, a quick point.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm just going to back up much of what Anna's just said, because I mean, one of the things that's been a feature over a number of years, a number of different administrations, is over us setting a capital budget and then not delivering a lot of that capital budget. So often we set a borrowing requirement on the assumption that we're going to borrow or spend a certain amount of money on capital, and at the end of the year we end up with a positive figure in terms of on that, because we simply haven't gone out and borrowed it and we haven't spent the money. And certainly one of the things we're united on, both myself and the Deputy Leader, is that we recognise that we have a limited amount of time left as a council. And we've really got to focus on what we have the resources to deliver while we're still here on the capital budget. So we are going forward, we're going to be really, really ruthless and look at that capital budget and say that, look, there's no point in having fantasy projects in there. We are not going to get done before we're long extinguished into the ether. We are going to be really, really realistic about that. And so that may well affect going forward some of the figures. On the MRP, you're absolutely right, Chair, and you and I have had many conversations over this and been in agreement on much of it. We will get some capital receipts in this year. We have had, I think it's just come in, quite a significant one. However, as you know, disposals of property do take quite a long time. You start the time it takes from actually marketing them and finding a buyer to getting the cash in. So some of them, which are well underway, the receipts probably won't come in till the sort of 27-28 financial year. And I just want to make sure that people are aware of that.
Thank you, Anna. Quickly, and then I have Kevin.
Completely support everything that the leader has said. As I said before, because there's been a bit of a reprofile to the one that went into the budget originally. We're doing that piece of work now to understand what the impacts are of that reprofile, i.e. some of the delayed capital receipts. It obviously will have an impact on cash. That's not a surprise, but we're just recalculating the MRP now.
Thank you. Kevin, please, and then Julie.
Thank you, and just encouraged by what the leader said about the capital programme. It'd be useful, I think, and if you, as when you're able to share, even if it's in Part B, we ought to see that list of what you intend to prune out of the capital programme. I think that's important as part of our prudence. We as the committee, I think, should have a look at that, maybe to assist you as well, nothing else. And also, while I'm not straying into the LGR on property panel, which I sit on Councillor Naylor, is we should start to think about what it is the new council, not a merged council, a new council is going to need. I look at the money spent on the Shrub End depot. Well, there'll be several depots between all four councils here. We won't need, I'm suspecting, all those depots. Maybe we have to replace them geographically. It's that sort of work we could start doing, and I think as part of that review of the capital programme, and I absolutely understand you want to dispose of something, it can take nearly a year, possibly two, to sell and dispose of it. You want the right price, and these things don't move fast. We should start doing that identification work. So there's a bit of overlap between what you're doing there, between this committee and the LGR and Property Committee, because I wouldn't want, personally, there to be just, well, we'll just make everything to the council, let them sort it out. That is not the way to start with a good council, and I think elsewhere in the country we've seen that hasn't worked when they've tried to do that. For instance, where there have been district councils merging into one county unitary, suddenly realising you have umpteen different civic buildings you no longer need on day one of there being a new council. We wouldn't want to, we're not quite doing it that way, but we wouldn't want to be in that position. So I think there's a rationale between that wider discussion clearly taking place and the work we need to do here as well.
Thank you, Kevin. Paul.
Yeah, just briefly, I can give reassurance that that is in the back of our mind when we look at all capital projects. What we do not want to do is not get best value for the taxpayer. There is a balance because we can't, we are still providing services as of today. So I know Anna spoke about the IT. We cannot have our IT system non-compliant or not working between now and April 28. And the reality is, when the new council starts on April 1st, 2028, everybody will still be turning up for work in the same place, doing the same job, collecting the same rubbish with the same vehicles. But we can't have you talked about Shrub End, we are not going to put millions and millions of pounds into Shrub End for things which are like a 20-year life cycle, like electric charging or like stuff. But when something breaks or when we need to have the right equipment to unload things, that still has to be functioning. So there is a balance between ensuring that our services continue to be resilient right up to and beyond, because we're going to start in April 28 with 3 different waste services, plus Essex County Council as doing the disposal, because there are contracts in place. Tendering has a contract in place with the owner, I think. So we've got to, it's a balance. So, we've got to keep the show on the road. We've got to keep things working. And we've got to ensure that we don't leave a broken system for the new council to start on day one. But we are very, very conscious of ensuring that we do not spend public money on things which will not have long-term value or lock that new council into decisions which they will have to make, not us.
Just quickly and then...
Yes, very good. Although on waste, yes, there will be, and there's presumably a mapping contract. I know there is a mapping of contracts for various services, waste being one of them. But for instance, a good thing would be, wouldn't it, maybe to have an Essex-wide waste company delivering either in 2 halves or for the whole of the county. That would save a lot of money as opposed to maybe 5 separate waste collection and disposal units. That's got to be something that's looked at. I hope that is being looked at, because we're only doing LGR for the public, not for anything else.
Well, I absolutely agree with that information. I would say we're straying from the agenda a little bit. Councillor Dundas.
Very briefly, many people would agree with you. However, that decision will be for the 5 unitary councils to make. It is not for us to tell them whether they have one waste service for the whole of Essex, or they each choose to, some of them might wish to combine, some of them may not. That will be a political direction for those councillors who are elected in May 27. We can put a system in place and a recommendation, We cannot make that decision. If they want to do it one Essex-wide, fine. If they want to do 5 separate, fine. It is down to them.
I think we all want to trim our waste, whether that be personal or recycling. Anna, just briefly on that, and we'll move on. Thank you.
Yeah, not on that, but on that. So the capital, so just to give you assurances in terms of a piece of work that I've already been talking to the team about as part of budget setting, is to go through, and I've already agreed to give Paul and also Councillor Sun as a portfolio holder a list of every single scheme and as much information about the scheme as possible, i.e. is it borrowing, how long has it been going for, is it delivering, has it delivered, when is it going to deliver? Because the other thing we need to remember is that we need to understand the financial implications of removing something from the programme, because if there is no asset attached and there are spades in the ground, it's going to come back to hit us in revenue. So we're going to get hit with a whole load of revenue costs of stopping some capital. So it is a balancing item, and we need to make sure we understand. So the thing that I say to Councillor Sunix and to the leader is we need to understand the financial implications of absolutely everything we do, and you can make any decision you want, but you have to understand how it hits. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Julie?
Yeah, I think my question probably follows on quite nicely to what you've just said, and it's about what the public focus their attention on, things like the boating lake at Castle Park, things like Cymbeline Meadow, and where those kind of detail sits within a report like that. And because it's quite difficult, I think, for the general public to look at documents like this and say, well, you know, what are the implications of not selling Cymbeline Meadows? Because we know that there are financial implications of not achieving the asset disposal programme that we've actually put together. And I know the new committee will start to give a bit more public gaze to some of those projects, but it's very difficult, I think, in a densely populated report like that to pick out the kind of issues that the general public actually focus on.
Yes, Councillor Young, you won't get all that information in here. It's almost impossible, which is why it's something we're going to have to pull together. What you will see from here, and you won't know which scheme is funded by borrowing or not from here, you'll just know what the spend is, forecast spend. So that is a completely different data set. We have all that information, we just need to pull it together into a cohesive kind of spreadsheet for the portfolio holder and the leader to look at, and that will be all fed through the budget process. So it will emerge as part of the budget setting process, and you will see scheme by scheme and which will come out and what the decision is about what stays and what goes.
Thank you, and Councillor Dundas.
Very, very briefly on Cymbeline Meadows, there is a figure. I do know what that figure is precisely in terms of the budgetary impact of not selling it. I'm not going to mention it because it might be a Part B issue. And certainly one of the things I've said or instructions we've given is around the options paper is we need to mitigate that budgetary loss as much as possible in any future plans for Cymbeline Meadows, which I think we probably can. And actually, I think potentially looking at some of the things we could do, we might actually be able to improve on it. So we might come out on a positive.
Thank you. Okay. I don't see any other hands, so I think people are content with the answers and content with the report. So thank you to Anna, to David and to Jack, and good work behind the scenes as well from other departments. So we note the report, we're asked to note the revenue, capital and housing revenue account outturn positions for 25-26. Are we okay to note? Excellent, thank you, noted, thank you. We'll move on to the Build Back Audit Assurance. The committee are asked to consider the report outlining the path towards rebuilding external audit assurance following periods of having disclaimed accounts, etc. So we have Anna and we have Emma. Is there anyone else? Oh, and Adam as well. Sorry, no, not Adam, Mark, sorry. Okay, thank you. So welcome. Who's going to start off? So over to Emma. Okay, thank you. Welcome. We've seen you on screen many times. Good to see you in person, Emma. Over to you. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So I'm just going through our document today. I think this has been circulated slightly separately to the main paper, but I understand you still have a copy of it and have a look at it. So this is a document which is essentially setting out our position and where we are with building back assurance for Culture City Council. Before I go into the details, just recognising that we've got a few new members on the committee, I thought it's probably helpful just to give you a little update as to what building back assurance is and why we are where we are. So there was, over a number of years, a period of time where Culture Cities Council's accounts were unaudited for various reasons, both linked to the council itself, but also to broader issues across the whole sector. What that effectively meant was what we saw within the local government sector was a huge swathe of accounts which were not audited for multiple years. And in 2023, effectively the government said we need to take some action about this and we need to implement some changes to be able to move this position forward. What that did is they effectively introduced something called a backstop date. They are dates at which audits for councils have to be concluded, and there are multiple ways in which you could conclude. So normally under a normal audit situation we would work up to that date and then we would issue an unmodified, so hopefully a clean audit opinion, effectively saying we were comfortable with all of the numbers within the accounts. If you were unable to do that under this backstop, what you effectively were able to do is issue something called a disclaimer, which is where we were effectively saying we are unable to give any assurance of the accounts because we've been unable to conclude our audit because of the time constraint given to us by this backstop date. And that effectively was the process to start moving this account process forward. So KPMG took on the audit for Colchester for the 23-24 year end, so that was the first year we picked it up. And at that point we had 4 years worth of disclaimers. The 23-24 audit was also disclaimed, as was the 24-25 audit. So we've got a significant period of time where we've got audits which effectively have not happened. Now last year in particular we started being able to do some work, so we were starting to be able to get some assurance over the numbers within Colchester's accounts. But it's a long process. And what we now have been asked to do, and we've been asked to do this, and all councils will be having a report of a similar nature, is to report to central government, so through to MHCLG, to say where do we think each council is in terms of its ability to get back to full assurance. And the date that they've asked us to look for is through to 2028 because of local government reorganisation. And make those decisions based on the information we know already and the work that we've been able to do, and whether we think we can, in the time that's left to us, rebuild assurance. And how we would rebuild assurance is effectively having to firstly do a risk assessment, which is the piece of work that we have already done. So that's what this is reporting, the initial findings of that, and then doing the outcome work from that risk assessment. So for Colchester, as I say, I've set out there, we have got multiple years of disclaimed audits. We also know that during that period of disclaimed audit time, there were multiple challenges within the council in terms of its reporting, its governance, the ability to retain some of the information. So one of the key issues, say last year, we were looking at journals. And again, this is because obviously for last year's audit, we were looking a year before that effectively. You know, there wasn't that retained information, wasn't that retained knowledge. And we have seen through the VFM reports that we have written and shared with you, as and also the multiple conversations that we've had at this committee, there have been significant challenges in terms of the finances, and absolutely work is being done to address some of that going forward. And we've seen, you know, a significant shift over the last sort of 18 months. But that does not mean that all of those controls and all of those processes were in place over that time period. So what we have done is we've done the first level of, Mark's done it. We've done the risk assessment. What our risk assessment is to look over those disclaimed periods of time and say, actually, where would we have to do additional work? And frankly, we would need to do it over everything for Colchester. But the biggest and most riskiest area and the most challenging one is around reserves and getting comfortable over reserves. And it is my view that we are unable to rebuild assurance before LGR for Colchester. So you'll see in the report that there were 4 categories of which we had to classify all organisations into, so A, B, C and D. I put Colchester in the D bucket, which is effectively, I think there are significant challenges across the organisation, but in particularly over that disclaimed period. So I'm not saying that all of this is a here and now issue, but we have to consider the processes and controls and information available over that disclaimed period. So I don't think we are able to rebuild assurance in that time. Therefore, I will be reporting you as a category D, which is effectively unable to rebuild assurance before local government reorganisation. We will then see, what the outcome of this process is, because obviously the MHCLG are collating this information for all organisations, and I will report back in terms of the next steps on that. What this doesn't mean, and I want this to be really clear, is that we stop doing any work. That absolutely isn't the case. We will continue to rebuild as we are able to. So the level of assurance we can get, we've already had significantly more engagement and work completed this year than we had the previous 2 years. So we are on a positive trajectory of travel in terms of that closing position that will over time start to rebuild. But that piece of work around that historic number is going to be too much of an ask for us to conclude. Doesn't mean we won't do any of it. We'll have a look at if we can do some areas, but particularly the reserves will not be possible before LGR.
Thank you. I think it's fairly clear what's being said here and in the report. I have Sarah and then Kevin. So Sarah first, please.
Thank you, Emma. I've got quite a few questions. I'm always keen to understand how we got to where we are. I'm always keen to understand the context of other authorities that you are responsible for, and how we compare to those in terms of benchmarking. But I just want to start with, just to remind me, please, when we first began working with KPMG, I think I recall it was your, certainly your goal that we would achieve assurance by 28, 29. So naturally, from the member's point of view, it's very concerning that your view is now that that's not possible. So could you just comment about, I know you gave us a bit of narrative there, but what's really changed between your aspiration or expectation that you would be able to assure, and what's changed so we are where we are now? And then if you could comment, please, about your experience with other authorities and your company's knowledge of benchmarking and so on, and how Colchester compares, please.
So I think in terms of the aspiration, absolutely, when I started here, that was always going to be the aspiration. What very quickly transpired was we were unable to deliver any audit work in 23-24 due to the arrangements that were in place at that time. And actually, whilst last year we absolutely made progress, the historical issues have not been fixed. So the rebuild process, you have to effectively say no audit work was done, but also none of that preparation for an audit was done. So if we remember, the 23-24 accounts were prepared at the same time as, I think, the 22, 23, 21, 22, probably the one before that as well, all in one go. They were not prepared for an audit that was ever going to happen. So there is no retained sort of knowledge and information. And again, if we think about change within the finance team over that period, it is not consistent. You haven't got that core finance team and knowledge. And I think one of the things you have to think about as well when we're looking at the rebuild insurance is how to be comfortable over things like fraud risk. Well, if you haven't had people here, you haven't had processes, everything has changed, you had a whole shared service function in there as well. That's not to say that that was the driving force. There are issues clearly in the period before that as well. That therefore the ask is just within the time frame not possible. And what I wouldn't want to do is to sit here today and give false hope that actually, now that we know Colchester, because obviously coming in to the first point of call, we don't know, we didn't know the details, and now that we do, there are clearly challenges over that disclaimed period which will not be fixable in this time frame. In regards to your second point, we are collating this information across all of our audits, as will everybody across the country. So we will be able to have a view in terms of where you sit, but that hasn't happened yet. The deadline for collation is the end of the month.
Thank you. A follow-up, Sam?
Yeah, and just to the point, because I was reflecting on, always interested in impacts, because of course we don't do this purely as an academic exercise. And to the point where you've mentioned in the context, this can't be done for LGR. What impact does it have when you hand over the finances of an abolished authority to a new entity at which you're not, the new receiving finance team, as it were, cannot be clear what exactly it is they're inheriting in terms of reserves? Is that a correct understanding, and what impact does that have, please?
So, right, so the position would be that you would more likely than not remain a disclaimed audit opinion by the time LGR occurred, or at best a modified opinion. What that means is that the challenge on that new organisation is how do they continue to get comfort. Now, what I don't know yet, because the LGR is new in this context of disclaimed audit opinions, is how we as auditors would get comfortable over that. But I think there are a couple of things to remember. Is that new organisation would be much larger in size, and therefore things like your materiality levels and the level of assurance that you need does change. So that would be an area of consideration. And you would then again be able to do some of that risk assessment to say, well, actually, how materially wrong would these balances need to be? But that is a very much a theoretical response, because we don't yet know how we would need to work that through, and that's something that over the next couple of years will certainly be thought through with the department and across audit firms.
Okay, thank you. Just one point, Chair. Could we request that we get that information when it's available at the end of the month about the benchmarking?
So I'm not saying we will do benchmarking. I'm saying I haven't got the information yet to give you a comment about that. It won't be a formal benchmarking piece of work we'll be doing.
Just perhaps we can not lose that point somehow, capture it as something we need to return to perhaps in autumn.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll return to that, and if we can note that in the minutes, please, Owen. And we'll be sort of checking in, I think, with Anna and the portfolio holder and the new Section 151 officer to continue to be updated to ask Emma those questions. Thank you. Who should I have next? Sorry, Kevin. Yes, Kevin.
Thank you, and thank you for this. A good piece of work. This has been a big concern for not just Colchester, a number of councils across England. So this is great to have this assurance. 3 quick questions, which may not require quick answers. I don't know. But first of all, what is it you've seen that we should be worried about, other than having disclaimed accounts? Secondly, does that mean then our reserve figure, as your concern, is accurate at the moment? And thirdly, does this impinge on us with our borrowing that we may need to do between now and 28?
So for the borrowing point, I think you at the moment you have management information. You need to make those decisions on the information that you've got available. I can't give you any assurance.
In terms of credit rating?
Not that I've seen currently. This is a sector-wide issue. It isn't a Colchester issue. So there is, I think, a knowledge of that position. Generally, councils are relatively comfortable with that position. In terms of the, I suppose, the level of assurance of reserves, clearly it's something we haven't done any work over. So I can't really comment to you as to the materiality of reasonableness there. We are starting to work on that going forward, so we will now start to do that sort of in-year piece of work, which we haven't been able to do before. So that again will start to build up that piece. And then in terms of what are my sort of other areas of concern, I think they have been relatively clearly set out in my value for money reporting. So there are, I think, fundamental challenges that Colchester needs to grasp, some of which is absolutely starting to happen. But there is still a lot to go across the organisation. This is not, there's been a capacity and capability challenge within the finance team that has absolutely been improved. We've seen that, and that will continue to work through, but I think it goes beyond just a finance issue actually in terms of some of the broader processes. So if you haven't seen that, our annual audit report from last year, I suggest us having a look through that one.
I agree completely on the finance team, and we've had some excellent work done, and there has been something of a churn before that. So this is a welcome sign. We've just agreed the outturn report, and therefore, does anything you have said affect the outturn report that we've just agreed?
So we haven't yet commenced the audit fully. So let me get through that. But once, obviously, when we do that, the findings, I think it is fair to say that this year will probably be the year we'll be able to audit the most that we have done. So I suspect this year, probably what, after 7 years, 4 or 5 years, of non-audited, fully audited numbers, we will be given that challenge. It will not be surprising to me if we find some things, because these are numbers which probably haven't had that level of scrutiny for a while. But yeah, we'll get through the audit, and let's see where we get to in the audit.
Thank you, Emma. And Martin, please. Your mic.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at your statements on page 5, which I think if anyone who was a teacher would say that's an Ofsted fail. Can you comment on the adequacy, from your perspective as the external auditor, of the internal audit at that time?
No. So I can't, we didn't, it's during the disclaimed audit period. So, no, I can't give you I wasn't here for that comment. So I can, we don't rely on internal audit. So we use internal audit as a tool to help our risk assessment. So we will review internal audit reports and the findings of those to steer our directions, and we have inquiries, but we don't place any reliance on any of the internal audit work. So I couldn't give you a sort of a thoroughly detailed consideration of it. Have I seen anything in the last 2 years which alarms me about internal audit? Not particularly, but again, we're not looking at it through that lens. And I certainly can't comment on the internal audit coverage throughout the period through which I wasn't involved.
Okay, I'm probably asking you as a general question, as someone who's not an accountant. If an organisation has those 4 statements that bad, would it raise questions about the adequacy of the internal audit?
So, sorry, can I just clarify? Are we talking about the rebuild and assurance issues from 24-25, that page? So these are financial statement issues, so not areas which would necessarily be covered by internal audit in the same way. So an internal audit function is there to look at controls and processes and compliance with that. What the areas I've pulled out here is effectively saying last year, as part of our external audit, we were unable to get assurance over the balance sheet numbers. Same for investment properties, because we had particular challenges around the valuation there. Again, not something you would necessarily expect internal audit to look at in terms of the accounting linked to that. So these are specific financial accounts issues rather than internal audit process control points.
Thank you, and it's more related to the inability to get the information rather than information being wrong or something being drastically out of order. But again, you can't comment because you haven't got enough information. Is the answer to that question? Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. It's an ongoing relationship, isn't it? It's a relationship that's strengthening. It's a relationship where you're finding out more about your partner here, Emma, what we've done and what we are doing. And I definitely feel, and as Kevin reiterated, we've got much greater control on the financial matters as referred to here. We have gone through further revaluation of assets to fully understand, for example, on the Colchester Northern Gateway asset strip deal. So we are getting there. So I hope with more information we will be getting to a much better place, but we understand what you've said about category D right now. That is what it is. So I therefore come back to councillors to ask that you have considered the report outlining the path of rebuilding external audit assurance. It's contained in the supplementary agenda, as we have seen. Are we happy to consider and note its findings, note the contents? Noted, thank you. That's all we're asked of doing. So thank you to Emma and Mark for coming and reporting. Thank you again to Anna and the finance team, giving all the information they can, doing all the best they can. Thank you, folks. See you again soon, I'm sure. Welcome back, Hayley. It's mainly your evening, so we hope that you are not taking any risks. Well, risky bad humour. So 7.5, the year-end review of risk management. Committee are to consider the report that provides members with an overview of the Council's risk management activity undertaken during the financial year 25 to 26. We have talked about risk at a number of meetings already and continue to update risk, continue to ask Hayley to note risks or to note the differing risks. And we continue to face a riskier environment globally that affects us locally. So over to you, Hayley, for a brief update on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I know we went into the territory of discussing risk at the last meeting, which was really good, and it is really encouraging in terms of the role that you have as a committee to review the council's processes, to assess the council's risks, and to provide challenge where you feel that that's appropriate. So in terms of the reporting that I give to you during the year, you have two formal reports. So this is the year-end review for 25-26. You will get a mid-year report around about the December-January time. It's in the work programme, but I can't remember when it is off the top of my head. You will get those reports. Now, I'm just going to jump in the covering report slightly, because at the last meeting, obviously when we discussed risk, there was a request raised to have some interim reporting in terms of in between the two major reports. So basically every quarter doing you an update. Obviously I've taken that on board. And as part of this report, you've got a risk management strategy. Now, we don't have to review the strategy every year for risk, but it's good practice to do so, just to make sure that the processes support our aims and objectives and the direction of travel for the organisation. So I have taken the liberty of updating that strategy and the reporting programme, adding in two informal reports to the committee in terms of that in-between reporting. They won't be formal committee reports. I think we agreed last time. They will be an email update for you that will be sent out to the committee with the current strategic risk register on, so you can see what the current position is. So for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of listening to one of my risk reports previously, I will do you a very brief summary of risk at Colchester City Council. So we manage risk in various ways, and like all good risk management processes. We separate risk out and we use 3 different specific areas. So we look at strategic risk. They're the things that I would class as the fluffy risks, the things that are hard to quantify, the things that ultimately Colchester City Council quite often doesn't have a huge amount of control over, but fundamentally affects the ability to achieve our strategic objectives. That's followed by the operational risks. That's, if you like, the harder risks. That's the real tangible items, the things that can go wrong that cost us money, the impact on service delivery. So there will be things like health and safety risks. So injury, damage, property damage, impact on services. A good example of an operational risk recently has been the heat wave. So for us, we have processes that look at managing that risk to our staff. So you're all seeing the updates on social media in terms of, we know there's a heat wave coming, having our staff out in the midday sun, doing a really physical job is a huge risk. So we looked at the processes. That's part of business continuity as well, and you'll get a report on that later on in the year. But that's our operational side, how we deliver our services and what can stop those services being delivered properly or achieving their objectives. And the third area we look at is project risk. They're the areas where we have, ranging from some very straightforward, simple items, one-off delivery of an item, through to our major ambitious programmes of, for example, the Northern Gateway Sports Park, which we discussed last time, and the risks around those. So we separate them out into those 3 areas. This report primarily looks at strategic risks. This is the area that for yourselves is part of how we deliver the objectives of the council and the objectives the administration puts into place. Now, those strategic risks are owned by the board. So senior leadership board review those risks on a monthly basis. I'm actually going to see them again this Thursday and talk about the risks that are on the risk register. And risk is always an area that's hard to quantify, because if you get your risk management right, nothing goes wrong. But by the same token, you never quite know what might be around the corner. So it's always a difficult one, and it's always subjective. People's view of risk will be very, very different. I won't go on a roller coaster because it might hurt and I might feel sick. My daughter, on the other hand, loves them to death. So everybody's view of what they're prepared to accept is different. So when it comes to talking about risk, it's always a subject that it causes quite a bit of debate about where we're coming from, how those risks are managed, what actually constitutes a risk to us. So, and I know I'm going into a bit of detail, Chair, but I think it's important for those that haven't been on this committee previously to understand what we do. In terms of the strategic risks, we actually review risks based on the PESL process, which is a standard risk management process, and it looks at risks under various headings: political, environmental, service delivery, legal, economic. And we have an extra one which is about service delivery. So those PESL areas, we look at all the risks relating to those and we score them on a basis of 1 to 5 for probability and impact. So some people will score risk on a 1 to 3. We score on a 1 to 5 because it breaks out those risks a little bit more, gives you a bit more of a range to look at rather than concentrating in certain areas. And more than 1 to 5 is really difficult to quantify, and I can do 5 times 5 and that's 25. Anything more than that might be slightly difficult. So we look at that process of the 1 to 5, which is quite normal. We also have a process that we adopted about a year ago, looking at our risk appetite. And when you look at the strategic risk register, it looks a bit weird because you've got this column that says appetite, and what does that mean? Some of you will have been involved in that process. We actually got our external consultants, risk management consultants, in to help us. Risk appetite is different to the risk score. The risk score is about, could it happen and what will happen if it does happen? The appetite says, is that risk you're taking something you're prepared to accept? we have a risk tolerance level. So we've set an appetite, and actually that's quite innovative in that amongst a lot of our other local authority partners. People have kind of tried to identify a risk appetite. We went through a process, and it was a really strong process of questionnaires to senior leadership, to key officers, to members, to the members of this committee at that time were all invited into a workshop, completed a questionnaire about all of your attitudes to risk. What do we as an authority prepare to accept? So that's been incorporated into our risk register, and it's given us an overall risk statement of how we approach risk, whether we're not risk adverse. We actually, I think, as you're probably aware, quite open to taking risks, and that is really good. But what we do hopefully gives a parameter for that, so it gives some reassurance about some of those innovative risks we take. We've got a basis for understanding why we take them and are we prepared to accept that level. So I won't go into huge detail for you because I appreciate there's quite a lot there. With the risk register, we have set out the key risks. It's hard to read because it's quite small, and I'm quite happy to send that out as a bigger version so you can see those risks. But you can see there's a lot of red, and we actually have 2 scores. So in terms of managing risk well, what we should always do is an initial score for risk. So we should say, if we don't put any mitigating actions in, what is the raw score of the risk? What is the worst case scenario? And that is that first initial score. So the initial risk score and the rating is before we take any action to mitigate those risks. Now, those of you, and I think quite a lot of you are exposed to risk management, it's universal these days, will understand there is kind of 2 ways of dealing with risk. You either accept it and you find ways to mitigate it, or you do away with it. You offload that risk. You either put it into a contract, so a contractor picks up the risk, and we do that quite normally, or even insurance is a way of risk mitigation. So we take out insurance policies, and we spend quite a lot of money on those policies every year to make sure that if the risk occurs, we've got some financial cover for that. So that initial score gives us the raw risk. We then put in the mitigating actions. So the mitigating actions are there for you, and then we rescore that risk. So now we've put these mitigations in. Have we reduced that risk down? Do we make that more tolerant? So you can see that there's a lot of change between that red and the initial score to the second score rating, where actually there is 1 red risk left. So, and that is something that no matter what we probably put into place, and there's been a lot of debate already today about data and IT, cyber security and our data will always be our number 1 risk, I think, or will always be high up there, because regardless of what we do and all of the processes we put in place, we know that there are other people who are doing the exact opposite, trying to change how they can break into systems. It's evolving, so the hackers, etc., are always evolving and finding newer ways to deal with data and IT. So that risk is one that we accept will probably be high for some time. The others, we've been able to bring the risk levels down from very high to high. And I've set out for you a very brief summary in the executive summary about where our key risks are. So, as I say, cyber and data security is number 1 risk. It's followed by several other risks, and I don't think there's anything in there that you would be surprised by in terms of the work that the council does and some of the innovative way we do things. So things like the Northern Gateway Leisure Park, as you would expect, local government reorganisation for us as an authority, and business as usual and workforce wellbeing. That's a key risk about where we go from here. We kind of have a plan ahead. We know what we think is happening, but that is a key risk for us at the moment in terms of even just the impact it has on delivering business as usual for this organisation, and the impact that it has on staff in terms of their thoughts and fears maybe about what's coming for them personally in the future. So as I say, the strategic risk register is supported by the risk management strategy. That's an overview. It's not detailed. It sets out our framework for how we manage risk. It's there to give us guidance. It's not there to be prescriptive. We do that as part of the risk work that I do with services. And I've also set out for you some of the capital and fit for the future and digital project risks, because that's been a question that's been asked about in the past. So we've started to report those through to you. That process will be refined as we go through, and we'll be able to give you some more details on those. Obviously, if you've got particular questions on those risks, they are a Part B item, so we would leave those to the end of the meeting and go into private session to discuss them, because they are of a sensitive nature, because they do relate to some key areas. And the last document, you've got the Appendix B, is a risk matrix. It's just, if you like, a little picture that sets out for you where those risks sit on a map. So you can see pictorially what's high and what's low. So you have two kind of boxes. The first one is the pre-mitigation risk scores, and then you can see how that changes once we put those mitigating actions in. And I appreciate it's probably quite a lot there. So obviously I'm open to any questions. What I would like you to be able to do is discuss the process of managing risk, the work that we've undertaken, and endorse the risk management strategy go through to Cabinet, because it's part of the policy framework. And I do know the answer to this one. It is part of the policy framework. It has to go to Cabinet for approval to then go on to full council to be adopted. So because that process takes a long time, it comes in towards the end of the year. Start the process now to be done by Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. That's brilliant. 5 quick points from me. First of all, thank you. I think you've shown that this process has continued to evolve and evolve in a really more informative and confidence building way. The fact you've already delivered on the action we've asked you to do from last meeting also builds confidence, so thank you for that. I think you've done a really good job here. The risk about your maths ability doesn't show up on the register, but hopefully we'll carry on working on that. The only one I thought an extra word could be added in is risk C, about the economic climate, just about global as well as national. I know that clearly global affects national economic climate, but just a point, as we well know, Straits of Hormuz and Iran, etc. at the moment, fuel prices, energy costs for us, etc. Just a minor point there. I like that it mentions portfolio holder for risk. It suggests that you are a risk. But I know, having worked with Alison, she's an excellent colleague and a very low risk colleague. She's very, very good at delivering, so good luck with that, Alison. The risk appetite work, I think, has been really good. I was involved with that previously as a Cabinet member, and I felt it really helped us understand our risks, as well as develop that opportunity to discuss appetite. And I do think Colchester has, again, within Essex, been an innovator, someone who would be a council who would be ahead of the curve on many occasions. Yes, sometimes that does end up with losses, but without risks, I think who dares does win. So we've done well there, so we are innovative. And lastly, sorry, one more thing, the mitigation and the way that the register has evolved over the years, I think is really good to see that. I think that helps us sort of prioritise what we need to do, so thank you for that. The last thing, just a random question, is alphabetical, but I don't see sort of A, B, C. I wondered where some of the letters have gone, where those risks have gone. Is that a risk that some of them don't appear on the register, or are they just not that risky?
No, they did appear on the register. So basically, they are risks that have been taken off the register. So I don't reuse the letters. What you haven't got there is the list of risks over the years that have come and gone from the register. We keep that record, but for kind of keeping the reporting clean, we don't report those. We are looking at a new process in the organisation, so going much more digital. So you think this looks different. We are looking at how we use our 365 environment to do much more reporting via Power Apps and to do that capture of risks. And I just wanted to come back to the point of global. Absolutely. Maybe you were listening at the last senior board meeting. We have a process when somebody wants to request a risk, because it's really difficult. One of the questions is, how do you get a risk on the risk register? So we actually have a process now that when we get a request for a risk, there is a form that's completed using our 365 environment. We use the forms, and I actually have a list of all new risks. And at the last board meeting, we discussed very much about the impact of global situations, because that kind of came out of a fuel issue. So when you think about when the war started, fuel prices went up very quickly. We were looking at fuel risks, and that has then expanded in that conversation with board in terms of impacts of global events on our economic environment. So that new risk wording is on the list to be reviewed by board on Thursday. So when you see the next update, if they agree the wording, it will be on there.
Excellent, thank you. And I hope before any other business, you called it risky business as the agenda item. Please take that forward. I was listening the other day. No, I wasn't. So thank you for that. The last point I was going to say, could you perhaps put an asterisk under the risk register to explain why the ones that have fallen off? Just helps. Well, wonder where the rest of them have gone. Thank you. Okay, Kevin, please.
I should be brief. First of all, I've got this terrible feeling, this is here because I was talking about it last time, so we need to see this quite often. I have a view, I think all members should see the risk register, not just the Cabinet and not just us here. Everyone should see it and have an understanding of what it is, because it actually defines the council. I would just say I think this is brilliant. This is one of the best risk registers I have seen in local authorities. It is very, very good. My 2 points, just on, and I noticed, by the way, the two really high ones that exceed our appetite, both around data and ICT. It's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure we had those policies in place with the caveats we put in. That's why I voted for it, because I could see this coming. I just wondered the question, when we say exceeds, then what? What does that actually mean once we put that in? And secondly, my final point, on page 150, which goes to the various topics, very good, by the way, it keeps talking about we. In a political environment, who do we think the we is?
I'll answer the one about exceeds first. I think in terms of where we exceed our appetite, that gives us the direction of where we need to concentrate our thinking. So sometimes something will exceed our appetite and we have to make a conscious decision to accept it. So there are times when we know it's outside of our comfort zone, but for justifiable reasons, we say we are prepared to accept it. But it's that clarity that when we're reporting on it, everybody is aware that we know, but we accept. It also leads us into the decision-making process of whether, if something is exceeding our appetite, do we actually want to proceed with that? Is that something that we need to make some decisions? It helps senior board make those decisions and give some clarity about direction to other officers in terms of how we operate and what we need to look at. There will be times, as we've set out, that we exceed our appetite, and it is just, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means that we are very aware that what that situation may be in the future, and we need to think carefully about whether that's a direction that we want to go in. It's just a bit of an aid to that decision making. Now, in terms of the reference to we on page 150, this is the results of the workshop and the questionnaires that our risk consultants put together. So, and they talk about it as in we, and that is a collective of senior officers and members in terms of we as a group are prepared to accept this. So this is a collective. So when we talk about risk, it should never be just officers talking about risk. It should never just be members. It's we as a collective are trying to make sure this organisation's risks are as protected as far as they can be, or dealt with as far as they can be. So that's why the word we is used in there. It was the collective of everybody.
Perfect answers to both, and answers I was expecting, so well done. I just think on the exceeding bit, can we just have a note? You explained that brilliantly. I think that just needs to be in there as explanation on the basis anyone not hearing this reads this, might ask the same question I did. And on the we bit, perfect answers, exactly what the answer should be. I think just a note to explain the we, so it's not seen as, well, it's down to the lead only, or it's down to the chief exec only. There is a collaboration of officers to identify those risks, would be my suggestion, Chair.
I'm very happy with those suggestions. Anyone unhappy with those? I'll come to you, Martin, in a second. I was just going to say that I'm very happy as chair to send an email to all councillors with this report attached, and to actually thank Hayley for the work and the attentiveness of her work on this matter. Thank you. Martin.
Hayley, can I come back to your pestle? The L, what struck me as not distinctly there in the strategic risk register was the legal risks. I mean, okay, they are embedded in individual ones. We've seen a mushrooming, though, of judicial reviews. We've also got, we've just introduced a public space protection order. There's a 6-week period when anyone can challenge that in the High Court. High Court judicial reviews, the tendency of the High Court is to award costs against the public authority, even if they win. So there's a financial cost. There is also we may have to start a process again, let's say the local plan. There's a risk somebody could take that one. If it was to be something to do with neighbourhood of criminal stuff, the courts are so clogged up at the moment that even before you get to a retrial in the Crown Court, let alone the Appeal Court, this council will probably have ceased to exist. Should we actually have, both in terms of cost and impact, a discrete legal risk there?
It's always difficult when you're looking at risk. It's really hard sometimes to separate risk out from consequences. Now, and you're totally right in terms of the challenges that we're seeing, the likelihood of judicial reviews, the local plan, all of those could result in legal action. But legal action is a result of something. So they are a consequence of a risk occurring. So when you do a root cause analysis, I could put a legal risk in there, but I can't control that because I don't know what caused that legal risk in the first place. So the actual risk is what caused that judicial review, what caused that legal issue to arise. And that's when in risk terms we talk about root cause analysis. You go back, what happened? Why did that happen? What caused it? Until you get to that original nub of what caused that consequences to occur. So if you look at something like, I'm showing my age now, Herald of Free Enterprise, if you can remember that. And I'd been on that boat as a child when I went to France. So the consequence was obviously catastrophic, but the cause was really simple and straightforward. It was a piece of the boat not being operated properly. So for us to manage risk appropriately, we have to go back to the cause. So I have to understand how that came about. So you've mentioned the local plan. The risk register you've got here is one that was done kind of in May, ready for June. The local plan risk is on the current risk register. So as I say, it's reviewed monthly. So we have the local plan on there, and the fact that it could result in significant legal challenge and costs if we don't manage it the right way. So whilst I totally understand where you're coming from, looking at legal alone won't manage that risk because it comes from so many different places. We have to understand what that root cause was. That's the risk we need to deal with, and then those mitigating action, the consequences are less. So, and risk is always very difficult. We don't have, the risk register doesn't include every single risk for the council. because it would just be pages and pages, because I'm sure we could all sit here and think of a dozen things that we could have on the risk register. So we have to concentrate the thinking on those areas that are going to give us the biggest consequences. So I do accept what you're saying, but I think for me, I would always advise you need to go to the root cause to stop that occurring in the first place.
Very in-depth answer there, thank you, because when Councillor Parsons made the point, I thought, oh yeah, there's a good one, but you've managed to de-risk the question. So thank you for that. I think we're at the end of this report. I think we've thanked Hayley for all the work, and I think we've noted a number of points. Yeah, can we make sure that's written in bold, please? But I'm happy to do an email as well, and if I need a reminder of that, please tell me if that doesn't come out within a week. So therefore, we are asked to consider the report, and I assume note it, really. I don't think we've got... Yeah. Endorse it. Endorse it to Cabinet. Yeah, okay, and endorse it to Cabinet. Excellent. We endorse it to go to Cabinet? Brilliant. Thank you all. Thank you, Hayley. The next item is the internal audit. I'm aware we're about 3 minutes away from our next break. Do we want to have that break or try and power through? Sorry?
Chair, isn't it finish at 9?
Oh, okay. Well, therefore, we should power ahead then. And we've got a visiting person, Ola, who's... can we bring...
Ollie's gone home, so I'm covering this report. So obviously
right,
you had your,
Hayley, we
had your conversation with...
just for the public's understanding, we had both Ola and Angela of the TIAA external operation that provides our internal audit advice and guidance, and we had a scrutiny sort of session in private where we were able to talk without the officers present to understand whether they're confident in the auditing that goes on here, the internal auditing, and we asked a number of questions. We had some very good answers that gave us confidence in the internal reports, so I just wanted to state that publicly. So we have asked questions and got some responses, and I can address those. Hayley, very quickly, over to you. Thank you.
I will keep it brief. In terms of internal audit, and I think Emma from external audit gave a very good summary in terms of the difference between the two. Internal audit is about our systems, our policies, our procedures, and how we work, and whether that's appropriate, and whether we've got controls in place to make sure that we're delivering effectively and efficiently. And with the external audit, they're looking at the financials, they're looking at the financial details, the accounts, etc., which internal audit don't tend to do. They do look at financial processes as part of the control process, but there is quite a distinct difference between the two. So in terms of internal audit, you again will get 2 reports a year. You get your year-end report and you get your mid-year report. So the year-end report is also the head of internal audit opinion, which we use in the annual governance statement, which came to you at the last meeting, in terms of whether we have an effective control environment. And that basically means, do our systems run? And when I say systems, it's not just IT systems, that's our processes, how we deliver our services. Do they run in such a way that it gives reassurance that we are providing the best service that we can with the resources we have available, and that they are protected against fraud or error? So in terms of the report before you tonight, it sets out all the reports, all the reviews undertaken during the 25-26 financial year, and it sets out the assurance level. So there are 4 assurance levels: no assurance, limited, reasonable and substantial. They don't give a full assurance. There's no such thing as full assurance, because they can't ever be 100% sure there's not something in the system. They can only do testing, they can only do sampling, so they can't give you a full assurance, but substantial is the highest rating you can get. So we do have quite a few audits that achieve that substantial rating. We did have some audits. We had 4 audits that achieved a limited assurance rating. Now, limited always sounds a bit wrong and like that our systems are failing. What we are finding with our managers is we are promoting the use of internal audit to look at areas where they have concerns. So it's always difficult because if you have lots of no or low assurance audits, there's always a concern that things are going wrong. But actually what we're trying to do is encourage the audits to be focused on the areas where we think there needs to be improvements. We could focus the audit programme on all the things we think are going really, really well, and we'd have a load of substantial and kind of reasonable assurance audits and be really, really happy. But that actually wouldn't give us the information that we need. So we do try and focus. You will have later on in the year, and I'll give you more details when you get it, the audit plan for the coming year. So you have an opportunity as a committee to think about any issues or concerns that have come up for you during the year as part of this committee, and you can ask for that to be included in the audit programme if it hasn't already been done so. There are some audits we need to do on an annual basis. As Emma said, external audit cannot rely on the internal audit work. They're not allowed to, but it does give them an idea of where there might be some areas they need to look at. So things like our financial processes, the key financial controls, we have to do those every year because obviously the external auditors will be looking to see if there's any red flags in that. So when we do the audit plan, I'll tell you more about those. So I think you probably asked Olu and Angela about some of those audits, but obviously if you have any concerns, then I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hayley. Yes, as I say, we did ask about a number of different issues. They reported back that we are a council compared to others that asked for more. We asked to look into more areas of our council work, so that was a positive. And 3 examples were looking into our markets, where they found some minor issues to improve processes. Leisure World, where we talked a bit about financial balances there on a very small, very low level system issue, and ICT and staffing costs there as well. So we were reassured with answers. The only one thing I would say is whether the report could have a little bit more detail on the 6 points of recommendation that were made, as I just couldn't find all the detail unless I didn't look in the
Is that the 6 urgent recommendations? Yes. Yeah, so within the internal audit report itself from TIA, they don't give a huge amount of detail in this report. What you'll find in the mid-year report is there's a little bit more detail. So what I can do is ask them to change that and provide more detail on any of those recommendations that are high level going forward. So you've got that detail. And if they haven't done it, then I'll include it in the covering report.
Thank you. Yeah, it only needs to be a sentence or so, just so we know what they are. Otherwise, we might worry in the void of what they could be. Otherwise, Hayley, I think this again shows that you are leading a good job of internal audit. We continue to, like the ethos of this council, challenge ourselves and make sure we are in a good position. And if we're not, learn from it. Are there any questions, councillors? No? So we are happy then to consider and note this report and to review and comment on it. Do we need to pass this anywhere else? No? Okay, then we comment. We've reviewed and commented on it. Are there any other comments? No, we're happy. Excellent, thank you. Agreed. Thank you, Hayley. So the work programme very quickly. Owen, anything from you on that? Or committee, is there anything you want to ask on that or update on that? Yes, Kevin.
I'm just wondering, in terms of some of the items, they're quite chunky, and it's just a question of how long meetings go on for, because we need to give everything due consideration. And I perhaps it's just me, I just think sometimes you start going past 3 hours, and that's a long ask for everyone to sit here, particularly our staff as well. So just looking at the 8th of September, we have Colchester Homes, and we have Amphora. To me, that is enough. If we then need to do the others, whether I don't want an additional meeting, I'm only speaking for me, additional meeting, But to round that in, are we going to get to the last item and give it due care and attention we should do, because it's suddenly looking like 9 or 9:30, would be my comment. I'm happy to go with the flow, but I just think I wanted to point that out for now. What's listed on a bit of paper looks quite simple. In reality, it can take quite a long time.
Thank you, Kevin. I understand that. I see that we've got the Q1 Colchester Homes in September, and then Q2 in November. We've also got a governance statement in October. So we could almost informally talk at briefings about where we want to do a bit more of an in-depth dive in order to take more time perhaps in one meeting than others, looking at it, because they pretty much are coming 3 meetings in a row. I absolutely get it. I think we've done well tonight to get through the business and give it enough attention. Yeah, absolutely. Any other views? I suppose it's about judging each turn, whether we can manage all of it in the time that we have. Do we leave that to group spokespersons? Yeah. So we'll take Kevin's comment, thank you, noted, and we'll pick that up at group spokespersons meetings as to reviewing if we think we can get it all done. Okay. As I assume people don't want more in the diary, but we will do our best. Okay, any other comments? No? Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, Alison, for staying all evening. Portfolio holder, Alison J. Thank you all. We note the report of the work programme and those comments from Kevin that we'll take to the briefings. Okay, thank you all. Sorry for the 8-minute overrun. Get home safely. Good night. Thank you. Thanks, Loosely, for stepping